there's so many. So going into the history of it, the Colombians would put it in concrete pillars. They put it in wood and fruit, and now they use it in narco submarines, which are really effective. We didn't really hide it. We were the guys that threw it in the boat and came in. I mean, even on the road, like people would take Winnebagos and put weed or coke inside that was in the walls or underneath. But what we did was just threw it in the trunk of the car and went. I mean, there's been times when I've been moving a couple kilos around Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
I'd go to, let's say I had to go pick it up, in Boca, at one of my connections. So I drive up in my BMW wearing a nice, outfit, then go home, go in my pickup truck and put on some overalls to go out to the country to sell it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. I got a very special guest here for us today. Please welcome Ken Bear. Ken, how are you, my friend?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. I know we had this scheduled a while back. We had some issues, some flight delays. TSA is wreaking havoc out
That's
there.
Right. That's right.
I can't tell you how many people I bumped into yesterday getting off the plane that were missing their flight or having to get rescheduled. It's been a nightmare trying to get down here, and it's usually smooth sailing, but it took a lot of work to get here, so I'm glad we got it knocked out.
Yeah, South Florida is a major destination. Usually it's easy to get here. Yeah.
Well, it was a major destination a while back for a lot of different reasons, one which you were
true.
heavily involved with. So,
Yeah.
You got some roots to the smuggling, but before we get into that real heavy, man, I always like to, especially when a first-time guest, go back to the beginning, man. Tell us a little bit about, early life, upbringing, family, whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And it really is interesting. It's a huge, dichotomy or change from what I grew up with to what I ended up with. And so I actually was born in a really simple place. It was called Wayne, New Jersey. In New Jersey, people don't know, it's the Garden State. It was a really little farm town. My grandfather had a farm, and we had a house on the farm. The people behind us were the Van Peenens. They delivered the milk in the morning, and there was 15 of them, so every time they needed another employee on the farm. But it was farm life. I had a horse. We had hay. We stepped in cow pies. And now, we didn't really work the farm. My father worked in New York City and also had a little store in the town that he sold clothing. He had a little men's and kids' clothing store, or actually men's and women's. And kids. But so I had a simple Norman Rockwell, as I say, lifestyle. Nothing. It was just as calm can be. My family were immigrants. They had come to Germany on the run from the Nazis, so they had resettled in America. They taught the hard-working. I grew up with a hard-working German immigrant, come to America, make a success out of yourself, work ethic. A love for this country and what it saved our lives. So my roots were strong. In 1969, I was 12 years old. My father got transferred to New Orleans, where the company had its corporate office, and we moved down there. So now I moved from the Norman Rockwell of the Northeast, like school trips are where Washington slept, that kind of crap, to like the deep South, Sodom and Gomorrah of New Orleans. And by the way, they didn't cotton to Yankees too much, even in middle school. But I loved New Orleans. I really learned, how to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, cherish my Southern upbringing. I really consider myself a Southern-raised boy. That's where and then in 1970, right after we moved there, my dad died. So now I'm a 13-year-old kid. It's the beginning of the age of Aquarius, drugs, the Vietnam War, free love, rock and roll, all the music coming of age, And, Bob Dylan has the song, The Times They Are Changing. And I always say, they were changing right there. Because if I stayed in New Jersey, it probably wouldn't have been as impactful, right? So we're in New Orleans, and I get high for the first time. A friend of mine turns me on to a joint. The next thing I did was a 4-way hit of Orange Sunshine LSD. Just a quarter of it. It's this big, and just a quarter of it, you're tripping for like 8 hours. So I'm like, all right, and then, I remember one time a girl, you know what a Quaalude is?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, before that, there were Soapers. I remember I'd maybe been 15, because I was driving. You get your license at 14. I was maybe 15. A girl sees me in a bar. Because back then, by 14, like in New Orleans, you're drinking. And she slips me a Quaalude and goes, here, eat this. It'll make you do what you want to do. I had no idea what she was talking about. She goes, meet me at the Barrel, which was another bar down in the other side of town. I'm driving down I thought about this the other day. I'm driving down St. Charles in a little Fiat I had, no seatbelt, high on basically a Quaalude, and I made it to the bar where she was, and she saw me. She goes, come here. And she was older than me. I was maybe 15. And so that turned me on to how good drugs can be, because you can get laid, right?
Yep.
And also, after my dad died, I really spent that summer alone in New Orleans. I didn't know anybody. And when I started smoking weed and went back to high school, high school, I guess, people started to connect because we were all smoking weed.
Right.
By 13 or 14, I thought I was the only one. I was the last to get there at 13. And my mother decided to, and she didn't know about any of my drug use. She just wanted to move to Florida. So her excuse was, we're going to move to Florida to get away from the drugs of New Orleans. And I'm like, in 1973. I mean, I was thinking now, gee, Mom, did you read the newspaper? I mean, 1973 was the explosion of the drug war. That's when boats started landing, and I was in the beginning of that. We started selling dope out of my mom's house. We had 3-finger bags, Quaaludes, little bags of Coke. I mean, like quarter grams. We were like small-time drug dealers. And everybody figured by the time I was 16 at that point, and we ran a business. I mean, people would come in on a Friday night and go, I'll tell you what I'll do. How much money you got? Here's a pack of rolling papers. Here's a half a bag of weed. Here's a half a gram of Coke and 2 Quaaludes. Like me and my brother were like entrepreneurs, But everybody figured when you turned 18, you'd stop. You go to college, you go away. Because when you go back then, they have a thing called juvie, or Sheriff's Boys Ranch. And you would go there and not go to prison. Because by the time you're 18, you might be ended up in Rayford, one of the worst prisons in the world. And that's Florida's big state prison. And everybody figured, well, we'll get 18. I didn't quit. I just got this, I got to be bigger and bigger. And I just started, then what happened was, I guess this is the facts. I ended up being introduced to a guy who was a yacht broker that was in his 40s, and I was 18. And he took me under his wing as like his gopher. And then he started selling, he was from New Orleans, so that's how I knew him through people in New Orleans, boats and planes to smugglers. So I literally was in with the biggest smuggler in the world at the time. Probably in his name was Donnie Steinberg. I mean, they called I think they called our group the Company. He was on national, I mean, he's in Playboy magazine. They've written books about him. And Sandy was selling, the guy's name that I was working with was Sandy, was selling them yachts. And at the same time, my high school buddy who I was selling bags in high school, it was 1977. There was a real estate collapse here in Florida. So he moved to 76, 77 to Ohio. So, and we were selling ounces in high school and stuff. And he's working at the Ford plant. And these two things are critical to how I became. He says, hey, I think I can sell some weed up here. I said, well, come on down. I'll give you a couple pounds. So on his weekend off, he jumps, and he had a black Trans Am, and he kind of looked a little bit like Burt Reynolds. So I swear to God. So he drives down with his girlfriend. I give him the 2 pounds. He jumps back in the car and drives up. It's 19 hours each way. So it's a full, kick-ass deal. Calls me up. He goes, hey, I sold those 2 pounds. And then at the same time, I was more entrenched with the Donnie Steinberg operation. Donnie was giving me a Learjet and a couple $1 million in suitcases and saying, all right, fly them down to the Cayman Islands, drop them off at the bank, and fly back. That was one of my errands. Sometimes I'd go register a boat in Louisiana. Turned out I was really good at forging the titles.
So what were you getting paid for that to do?
So
that trip?
that's a good one. So to bring between $1.5 million, $2 million down, they would give me 1,000 cash.
And in those days, that's
like $4 or $5 grand.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and sometimes I get my girlfriend, dress her up real nice. We get dressed up and look like some rich kids, and then and we did it a couple times, and then one time, Sandy, who was my direct boss, said, "Hey, don't come back to America on the Learjet. Things might be getting hot. Go to the Bahamas." And that's what we started doing, check in, hang out, and fly back commercial. So I go, all right. So one time I do it, and we land in the Learjet, me and my girlfriend in a casino, and these 2 young Bahamian guys come up and go, hey, they're all nervous. They go, we saw you flying in a Learjet. They go, we got a couple kilos of coke. You think you could help us transport it? And I just said, fuck, Bahamian police, or not, but my first gut feeling was the police.
Yeah.
It was, the narcotics, the Bahamian, I forgot what they call them. It was a B, I don't know, I can't remember, B something. But I went back and said, guys, we're done. I think we're hot, So then they went out and bought their own turboprop and flew it directly. They didn't charter the list. But so Terry again, my friend Terry in Ohio, wants more weed. So I go to Donnie, and Donnie goes, okay, take a bale. So a bale of weed's like the size of a bale of hay. It's 45 to 55 pounds. It's about this big, wrapped in burlap and rope or duct tape. Duct tape was the, if you go into a hardware store and you see a guy buying all the duct tape, you know what he's doing. He's wrapping either kilos back then or bales. So he comes back in the Trans Am. And let me tell you how much he looked like Burt Reynolds. And he was walking through a mall in Ohio one time when they were having a look-alike contest. He wasn't in the contest. The MC calls him over, and everybody voted him the winner. So I go, I don't think this car and you are very discreet,
No, definitely not.
But
he's thinking he's going to fit a bale of weed
in the trunk of a Trans Am, which did not.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work.
It didn't. So we're in broad daylight in the street trying to shove a bale of weed in the back of the Trans Am, and it just ain't fitting. So he's pulling out the jack, his luggage, his clothes. Finally, after about what felt like, an hour, I don't know how we did it, but we got it in and closed it. And I looked at him and go, you're driving all the way to Ohio, and you're going to have all your shit in the back seat. With your luggage, your jack. I go, at least I'd get a towel or something to throw over it. If I pulled you over and I'm a cop, I'm going to go, what's in the trunk?
Yeah.
Why is the jack and the tire in here? But he blasted out, and that, let me put it this way. That's the last time he ever worked at the Ford plant. We did that for 12 years, moving probably 50,000 pounds up there. And he could have bought a Ford dealership after he got done doing that.
I'm assuming he evolved from the Trans Am transportation into something a little bit more
exactly right. So so things traveled over. At one point, I had to leave the country because I had one of my friends in New Orleans got busted with some coke. It was like selling 3 grams to a DEA agent. But his father was one of the wealthiest people in America. They actually owned the Monteleone Hotel in New Orleans. So his last name, was that's like for cops, that's bait,
Right.
So, and then they say, well, here's what they do. Can you get me a couple ounces? And he said, sure. He probably couldn't. I don't know what he could have done. He was one of my best friends, really one of my best friends growing up, but kind of a screw up. And he gets busted by the DEA, and somehow my name comes up. And I found out years later that it's possible that Sandy's daughter, Kat, was somehow maybe involved in some of the drug dealing that was going on with my friend in New Orleans, because she was from New Orleans too, and Sandy's from New Orleans. And maybe my name was coming up because of that. And Kat's claim to fame is that Ellen DeGeneres grew up in New Orleans. Kat was the first person to let that Ellen fell in love with.
Ah.
And that brought her out of the closet. And she talks about it, and does talk about Kat. And a couple years later, Kat was killed in a one-car accident in New Orleans, and some people think it was maybe somebody drove her off the road. I mean, sad, yeah. I remember when Sandy lost his daughter. It was powerfully a big loss to lose a child. But anyway, because of all that, I kind of had to fly to Jamaica and go on the lam. So now I'm like 18 or 19 probably. I'm in Jamaica. I'm hanging out. And Sandy's the one that arranged it. He kind of wanted me. I was his right-hand man, plus doing my own drug dealing. He kind of wanted me out of the picture, I think, to make sure I didn't get any heat on myself. And so while I'm down in Jamaica, this is my first smuggling trip. A good friend of mine, Bob Silverbullet, comes down with this other guy, Big Jeff, who was kind of another guy from New Orleans, another one of our crew. And they're going to bring 600 pounds out. And I'm sitting there. I've been in Jamaica now 7 months, just kind of digging it, but you're not making any money. And you get a little island fever. So I said, all right, look, I got to take a chance to go back through customs and see what happens. I haven't heard anything about this bust in New Orleans. I'll put up some money and I'll jump on this deal with you. They go, all right, because I said I can sell it to Terry in Ohio. So we brought out that was my first deal. I was about 19 or 20. We brought out 600 pounds of Jamaican lamb's breath, kick-ass weed. So that was my first smuggling trip. And so going back to me and Terry, so once we started figuring out how much weed we can move up there, we had to come up with a system. So what I did was, in Florida, I bought 3 what we call trunkers. So big cars, not Cadillacs, not Mercury, not Lincolns, Mercuries, Pontiacs, Caprice Classics. I had a bunch of Caprice Classics. And
big bodies,
right? What they call square boxes or big bodies, right?
Square box.
And we put air shocks on them. Because if you put 300-400 pounds in the trunk,
it's gonna ride low,
right?
Yeah.
And then we put the air shock, instead of putting it in the bumper where most people would put it, we had it inside the wheel well. So the driver, either the guy or the girl, could pull up to the gas station like they were putting air in their tire and just pop it up slowly. So we had 3 of those going back and forth, so they could hold about 1,000 pounds a trip, and we would send up at least 1,000 at a time. And then sometimes, like a trip would come in. Someone might bring in 40,000 pounds, as it evolved.
Right.
So people would call me and go, Kenny, I need to, I become a trusted broker. So, all right, I'll give me 2. I go to a warehouse, there's 30,000, 40,000 pounds. I have my pocket knife. That's my trusty knife. I still have it. My little buck knife. And I cut open the bales and mark them and say, these are mine, put them to the side. And then my cars would show up with my drivers. I rarely drove it. I did drive a lot, but in the end, I didn't drive anymore. I sent my team, and they'd pick up. So if we had more than 3 car loads, we would just go rent a cars. So we would literally go to like Hertz or National, rent a car, put air shocks on it, and with the same send them up the road. And we did that a lot. So I don't know how many times they got their cars back and go, the hell are these things? Like, I don't know how much, like 3 or 4 rentals later. And so that was it. And we did that for 12 years. That's what I got charged with.
Right.
Running a 12-year ongoing criminal enterprise.
And
but
in
we
that
did it in
12
different
years,
levels.
there was no brushes with law enforcement, no close calls or anything like that?
No, we had one girl one time. She was driving, a friend of mine's sister. She had 300-400 pounds in the trunk, and she blew a half shaft. Not a half shaft, but a drive shaft. So the cops pull up. She plays cute as a button, plays dumb. They tow the car to the local town because remember, this is 1970s, early 80s. You're driving from Florida to Ohio. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like this is the time, you'd be lucky to find a diner, little places to eat. It's nothing's pay phones, with dials on them. And she got to the little town. They put it on the lift. Nobody smelled the weed, which is incredible. At least nobody told it, turned her in.
Yeah.
They put the new drive shaft in. She got a room for the night. Next day she went over, got the car, and left. Yeah.
I'd have been nervous as shit. to
You
go
think?
back
I
in the
would have
car
too.
the next day.
I think it was her first trip. I don't think she was, I mean, she could have just easily said, I'm in a hotel in, the car's on the rack, send somebody up here. I'm getting a hotel.
Yeah.
I'm getting a cab out of town.
Because I would have been so nervous that, the shop contacted somebody.
Yeah.
The cops are now either going to, arrest me as soon as I get in the car
Exactly.
or follow me to the drop.
Well,
wherever.
that's exactly what I would have thought.
Right.
I would have been my fear. And the thing about the cops, because I also worked for the DEA for 2 years, is they can't do anything without a committee.
Right.
And once they left their little county, they'd have to get another county. And so what we used to do literally is try to drive 24 hours nonstop, because we figured if they got to usually back then, remember they didn't have the connection between the different police departments and the drug forces and the DEA.
Right. It would take days to send messages like that.
Yeah.
Like that.
So if we keep moving fast, one would have to drop off and they'd have to try to get another one as you go through their jurisdictions, which sometimes required bringing a couple grams of blow with you, so you never,
Yeah, you gotta have something to stay awake.
I used to tell my drivers, get a room, don't drive. But that would come out. I'd give them, let's say, $2,000 or $1,000 plus whatever. So the less they spent, the more they kept. Mm-hmm. So I said, son of a gun, you drove straight through, didn't you? But yeah, that's how I got started. That's some of the things.
And what are you bringing in weekly, monthly during this time frame?
So so here's the thing that I want people to understand. Like, in today's cannabis world, you can sell weed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year, because you have light dep, you have indoor, you have light assist, hoop houses, you have all this stuff because there's legal grows.
Right.
Back then, you have to bring it in from Jamaica or Colombia. And they're going to run a grow season, just like corn. So it's going to grow. You might get 2 grow seasons a year, but mostly one. So you harvest weed in October, and you got to, dry it, trim it, package it, and transport it from the mountains to the ports of where there's an airplane or a boat. So what would happen is you would get all the marijuana we used to call Christmas buds. All the good weed would come in around Christmas because they harvest in October, just like you do other crops, right? And then by the middle of the summer, we'd be dry. There would be no weed. And what we did get was the stuff that either didn't sell or was transported late, whatever. So we'd have, during the season, we'd have cars going nonstop. As soon as we could move 1,000 up, he would sell that in a couple of weeks, and then we just nonstop, But when the summertime came, then maybe you'd have to slow. You'd just have to look around for weed. I mean, it was a constant battle to try and find work, Right. So, but like I said, we probably moved over the 12-year period. I'd say maybe 50,000 pounds,
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's not a lot. I mean, it's.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially it's a lot, but in those days, maybe not. What you would say a lot, but that was kind of leading me to my next question, right? There's a lot of people doing this. If you watch these documentaries, Cocaine Cowboys and everything else, and I've heard you say this in or podcasts as well. Like, Miami was built on the drug trade.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
So how is the competition, so to speak, of smugglers? Is it cutthroat? Is there enough for everybody and nobody really cares? Like, are you having to jock or lower your price for other guys that's wanting to do the same service?
Oh, yeah.
Or when people know that you're going to do, when you contact Ken's going to get your stuff from point A to point B. What's the competition level like of a smuggler?
Good question. Really good question. So here's the thing. By the time I got to where, I was in my early 20s, I was the guy that everybody could trust. Like, you call Ken, he's going to take, people. I remember people calling me up, hey, buddy, I got 1,000 pounds in the back of a pickup truck. Can I bring it by the house? Can you come over and look at it? I go, nah, all right. And so let's put some numbers together. So I'm a 20-something-year-old kid. I mean, like 22 or whatever. I need $250,000 to get 1,000 pounds. So it usually was costing me between 240 to 245 a pound, buying it in bulk. So that means I'm probably one guy away from the guy that brought it in, or actually dealing with the guy that brought it in, right? Because even if the guy brought it in, he might say, hey, talk to my underling, and that guy might get a nickel, whatever. The most you could sell, if I had 1,000 pounds, and let's say it was in the middle of the season, right, supply and demand season, means all the weeds in town. Everybody's bringing in 40,000. Donnie's bringing in 200,000. Randy Lanier's bringing in 170. You know, there's a lot of weed in town. So people are jockeying to find a guy that can move it. The market's flooded. Still, if I could buy it for 240, the most I could ever sell it for is 245 in town. Right? If I'm lucky, make a nickel. Which a nickel's $5,000 on a $250,000 investment. Not very good money, but it's still. And let me put things into perspective for today's listener. Back then that's like $1 million today.
Right.
You know, it's in 1977, $250,000. You could have bought an office building.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money. So for a 20-something-year-old kid to be jockeying around now, and normally I got it to where I could put down like 80 grand, you know, like because my money's not moving around. I go, I'll tell you what, guy calls me up, hey, I'll take 1,000 or I'll take 2,000, 1,000 at a time. I'll give you 80. I'll be back and I'll pick up the other load and I'll slowly pay you off the $500,000. And that was no problem.
So you're making $5,000 a pound, roughly.
Well, when I send it up to Ohio, I'm making $40 a pound.
Yeah. Between
Between 30 and 40. So if I send 1,000 up, I'm making between $30,000 and $40,000.
Okay.
In 1970s, 80s money, which is a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
But still, I'm not living like, you know, I had a Porsche and I had BMW and I had this boats, but I'm not living like. It ain't like I'm Pablo Escobar.
Right.
I'm a working man. You know what I mean? Because things go wrong. Cars break. You have to buy new cars. I'll tell you a story. I'll give you an example of what can go wrong. So it was a slow season, right? It was like maybe it was middle of March or whatever, April, May, say, and I needed weed. So a friend of mine goes, hey, there's a guy in Miami that's a friend of a friend ends up having me go to Miami and look at some flowers, some weed. And I'm in this warehouse, and all of a sudden, because let me say this, when you talked about the competition, the original guys, we were just hippie kind of pot guys. Nobody carried a gun. Nobody went to discos. Nobody gave a shit about dressing fancy. Just guys running some dope. We'll get into this, but when I started selling weed and blow, there was no Pablo Escobar. There was no Ochoa. There was no, Guzman. There was no cartels. I had my good friend Tommy Powell, who you probably should interview. He went down to Colombia in 1971. I think he was one of the first guys with a shrimper to get 20,000 pounds, and they didn't have it. Like, he couldn't organize it. The most he could load was 16,000 pounds. Prior to that, like my friend Bruce and my friend Bob and Frank and Cecil, what they would do is they'd fly like a Beach 18 down to Colombia, which would hold like 1,500 or 1,800 pounds. They'd fly it back into the Bahamas or off Fort Lauderdale somewhere and have little 24-foot open fisherman formula boats. As an example, I'm telling a story that.
Right.
And they would kick the bales out at night in the ocean. And they would have Calium glow sticks. And they were taped to so you could see it floating.
Right.
And then they would pull it in the boat, drive it back in through Fort Lauderdale, and just put it on a trailer at the boat ramp and pull it out or bring it behind someone's house. There were guys that would come in with maybe go to Jamaica or even Colombia and put 300 pounds on a sailboat, just wrap it in a sail bag, leave it on the deck. That was the original smugglers. Cocaine was smuggled in false bottom suitcases, hollowed out dive tanks, hidden compartments in vehicles and stuff. It wasn't what it is today, which is containerized shipping, right? And narco subs. But anyhow, so it was very small. So then we get fast forward to the cocaine cowboys or the way that marijuana exploded. You know, all of a sudden, you know, the Ferrari dealer, there's an urban lore, Steve Shelton, who I used to race cars with, the Shelton Ferrari, there's an urban lore, they had a guy sleeping in the back of the Ferrari dealership. So if you made money, you could go there and buy a car out, like for cash. I remember I was on the beach one time. We used to have paddleball courts. They're still there in Hollywood Beach. That's where we had nothing to do but hang out. And that was before TV was on after midnight, and things like that. And I see this friend of mine, Ricky Smith, pull up in a brand new Panatera, it's just super hot. It has a Ford 351 engine. De Mazda de Panatera. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, beautiful car. Still to this day, I have a friend that has too. And he's like dripping wet. I go, Ricky, what are you doing? He goes, man, I just ran in 2 boatloads. And he goes, and I go, how'd you get the car? He goes, yeah, it was part of the deal. I got the car. He's driving like a exotic sports car that I guess, he got paid probably $35,000 in the car for running the boats in. And I mean, he's on the beach, like hanging out. There's just got in about 2 hours ago, whatever. So it was that simplistic. Mm-hmm. And then it escalated into basically building Miami and South Florida. The drug money just built everything, you see. And then with that and the cocaine and the volume of cocaine came the violence.
Well, I know you mentioned a name earlier, and you and I actually spoke about him on the phone prior to getting here, but Randy Lanier, his story was on Netflix. I think that series was called Bad Sport.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but basically he had like a Le Mans race team or something along those lines that he was doing. I mean, that was...
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that was a front, but he was definitely using some of the proceeds, I think, to do that because they were killing it in that race.
Oh, no. So here's Randy's story, and anybody that gets a chance, go look at Bad Sport. I think that segment is called The Need for Weed.
Yeah.
He's also got a book out that is phenomenal, but it's called... I'm going brain dead. Excellent book. Anyway... he's the real deal. They're talking about making a full-length motion picture about Randy. So here's the story about Randy. Randy started out, poor kid in Virginia, kind of a farm boy, moved to Florida, doing construction, started selling weed, making some money, bought a little power boat, and someone came to him and said, hey, why don't you let me borrow your boat? Because at those times, we'd go to the Bahamas and pick up 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even, big. It was early 70s. And he goes, well, let me go over there. I'll drive the boat in and pay me to do it, not just rent my boat. So that's how he did his first trip. And then he did another bigger trip. And him and his partner, Ben Kramer. Mm-hmm. And Ben Kramer's famous for Apache power boats.
Right.
And also for being the convicted guilty of killing Don Arno, who was the guy who built cigarette boats. And there's books and movies out about it.
So he was the guy that killed Don.
Yeah, well, he wasn't the one that pulled the trigger. He's the one that put the contract.
Facilitated it. Because Don, basically was supplying not only the government but the smugglers. He would one up, one to the other. He would sell a boat to this group and then sell a boat to the other.
Yeah, I can
group.
tell you about that. So let's digress and tell that story.
Yeah.
Because then we'll go back to Randy, because Randy's story is so great, it ain't going nowhere. So one of my other smuggling buddies, Nathan, and in my book, I talk about it. We'll talk about that, a couple of those trips that Nathan and I did together. He made so much money. I mean, he had a Lamborghini Countach. He had a Porsche Carrera. I mean, this guy he'd make a couple $1 million doing some sort of smuggling. They all grew up together.
Right.
Randy, Ben and Nathan knew each other. I don't know if Randy knew Nathan. And, because they're all a couple years older than me. So if you're 16, they're 20 or 19. I think Randy's like 2.5 years older than me. That changes everything because you're hanging out with the younger brother, not the older brother, right? I went to college with Marky Kramer, Ben's younger brother. We were, that's our age group. Bobby, Randy's younger brother, and I were jet ski buddies. So this is the story, and there's a book out, Blue Thunder. There's a movie out, John Travolta plays Don Arno. There's a lot.
Kills, I think is the name.
Is that it?
I think so, yeah.
And you got to understand, he was playing both sides, but he was just selling. Everybody was. Anybody in the boat business. There was a story real quick about this guy, Tommy Adams, who was in the boat business building boats. And he was right here, one exit away from where we are now, not even a quarter mile. The cops had him undercover because I guess they busted him. And he was talking to some Colombians wearing a wire. And my mother had some business when they were in partnership on a fiberglass lawn chair deal that she tried to do with her boyfriend and him. So I knew Tommy Adams. And this is how fucking crazy it gets. He's in the warehouse. He's talking to the Colombians because, again, he was a boat builder, so he's trying to sell the boats. I guess he got busted again, like obviously working for the cops. And the mic, they have AM radio on, right? And the mic is on an AM subchannel. That's how it's set up, to the guy in the van with the little. And so Tommy's talking, and his voice is coming over the speakers. So the Colombians figure it out. He looks at them. He runs and gets in his car. He drives up I-95 to run from them. The Colombians get in the car to chase him. The cops are chasing him now with the lights on. The Colombians don't care. They machine gun Tommy in his car right here, right up between here and like Sheridan Street. You're on Sheridan?
Wow.
He didn't make it to Griffin Road. Right here. And and of course the cops grabbed the Colombians. But the Colombians, they killed them with the cops right behind them. They just machine gunned them. And so that's the kind of shit would happen. And you open the newspaper and just get blown away every day. Because clickbait sells. Right. Back then, to get a dime or a quarter in a newspaper can, you had to put something on the cover like that. Mm-hmm. So going back to Ben Kramer. Ben and Randy, Randy doesn't really talk about it in any of his podcasts or any of his stuff, or even in his book about Ben. He kind of separates himself. But to know the story is to know they were good friends, deep partners, went to Columbia originally. And what had happened was Nathan, here's what happened, why Ben got killed. Ben opened up a catamaran company, so cigarettes are V-hull, catamaran boats are dual hulls, but a big one, for cigarette size. And U.S. Customs, and they can handle certain waters, they're better in certain V-hulls, are more, they're good in big seas, I think, but cats are faster in smaller seas anyway, more stable. He starts his company called Squadron 12. U.S. Customs buys the contract to have like 10 boats made, right? Don sells Squadron 12 to Ben. Now, if you grew up in Miami, you would know this. There was a section in Aventura that's called, I forgot what it was called, but let's say Speedboat Row. And all the boat companies are on the section in Aventura, which is a couple miles south, on the water. So there's Apache power boats, there's Cigarette, there's Scarab, there's Formula, there's all the big manufacturers are in that row. If you wanted to buy a boat, you could just go from one to the other theoretically. So Ben and Don are basically, neighbors. So Ben agrees to buy Squadron 12. Now here's the story. He gives him $1 million cash and his Apache helicopter. They use the helicopters when they race the boats to be above them, to follow them in case of an accident, video. Most of those big offshore powerboat teams at the time had a helicopter. They might rent one, but he bought it. So when the deal fell through and he lost, Customs goes, we're not letting Ben Kramer build our boats. He's a known smuggler. He'll put trackers in them or they canceled the contract. So Ben went back to Don Arno and said, hey, I want my money back. And the story is Don said, I'll give you the $1 million, but I'm keeping the helicopter, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So that's supposedly why Ben had him killed. Okay. Because he ripped him off for $1 million. But that's not the only person Ben had killed. In my book, I tell another story about a gang of, murderers that were around robbing drug dealers and killing them and slitting their throats. That's a big story. There's been a 8-part documentary called the Apollo Gym Murders, and I was living right next to all those guys. I knew the whole inside scoop. And one of my neighbors, this guy, Tommy Phelps, had killed a guy named Ted. I don't want to say Ted Fields, but something like that. And Ben wanted justice, so he hired a hit team to kill Tommy. And they killed Tommy, like, again, a mile or two from here, right next to my mother's house. He was going to the Apollo gym, and they pulled up next to him. What we used to have, there used to be a thing called a Mac 10 or a Mac 11.
Oh, yeah.
Machine gun, right? Yeah. So if somebody got, assassinated with a Mac 10 or a Mac 11, the Mac 10's the 38 mil and the 11's the 45 caliber. We call it a Mac attack. Like they could go in a room, the guns shot like 3,000 rounds a minute. It would empty the whole clip in a matter of seconds, and it was only this big. The barrel was this big.
Yeah.
It didn't have any aim, so you
just sprayed.
Yeah. So what happened to Tommy was he was coming along in this pickup truck. They came up next to him, rolled the window down, and what you do with the Mac is you start low, pull the trigger, and it just climbs up because it's so much, firepower in this thing you can barely hold.
Right.
And I have a whole podcast I'm going to do about that guy who invented the machine gun. The story is crazy, dude. Wow. Crazy. But anyway, so Ben pled guilty to killing Tommy Phelps and killing Don Arno.
Wow. And then did he get life?
Yeah. But if anybody has the time, go in and Google the Apollo gym, or maybe you'll do it.
Absolutely.
That guy's a friend of mine. Those guys were friends of mine. I mean, I knew them well. And it was these mobsters that were going around robbing drug dealers. And at some point they just cut a bunch of people. They were going around town just home invading people and cutting their throats.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it was cutthroat back then. I mean, quite literally.
Well, I ADD'd you. My wife says, when I met my wife, I thought my initials were KSB. She's an expert in early child development. Somebody said I'm her Moby Dick, her life's work. And it turns out I have ADHD, OCD. She says I have oppositional defiance disorder, but I argue that. I have dyslexia that I've known that. So let me go back to a story I was telling you about how you lose money. I apologize, guys, but I was telling a story about how through a friend of a friend of a friend, I ended up in Miami in a warehouse looking at it, I don't know, a couple 100 pounds of weed or whatever. And because I couldn't find any, I was kind of desperate. It turns out me and my friend are down there. And I look up, when I realize where I'm at, there's a Colombian guy and some other, either Cuban or Colombian, I don't know what they all were. And I look, I go, hey, this weed's no good. I can't use this weed, man. I just can't do it. And I don't understand Spanish, but I understood what he was saying. Basically, he said, look, you don't have to take the weed, but the money's not leaving. And then they all open up these dusters, and there's an AK-47, an M16. I mean, I'm not actually focusing on exactly which guns were what, but I'm realizing, all right, I guess this is going to be and I threw the weed in the trunk and left. I wish, in hindsight, I would have said to the guy, listen, I'll give you $5,000 for your trouble, but this weed's not good. Why don't you use your head? Let's work together. I buy thousands of pounds. I'm a connection you need for the future. But at the time, when all of a sudden, every time a different guy opened his coat, there was another machine gun. I go, I better just leave the weed. Yeah. I'm lucky to leave with the weed in my life.
Yeah, cut your losses and get them.
Yeah, the loss could have been two guys floating in a canal,
So is this the kind of the point to where you did start graduating to doing the cocaine on your trips?
No, so what happened is, because you couldn't get any work in the summertime, right?
Got a supplement.
Yeah, and you got to remember, we're like ants. Every day you're trying to find a new deal, a new scam. One time someone called me up and he goes, "Hey, I got 40,000 pounds stuck in Canada. You want to help me smuggle it back into America?" I'm like, all right. And we can go over that story. I got busted on the first time there. Or another time he's like, "Hey, there's a sailboat in Virginia. We got to move down." I go, "Is it dirty?" "No, it's clean. It's just a day. We'll go sailing for a couple of days. Fly up to South Carolina. I think it was Charlottesville. And we get it. We drop down into the boat. Beautiful sailboat. and it's got a letter on the desk, on the table. It says, this boat was searched by the DEA. We popped out of there. You would have thought we were on springs. Like, we landed in, saw the letter, popped out. And I tried to tell my friend, I go, listen, we could still move the boat. I'm thinking, this is great. We're going to be 3 days sailing a beautiful boat in the open ocean. But he's like, hell no. I go, Bob, the DEA searched the boat. And he's my kind of boss. He's my mentor. It's done. He goes, no, they'll wait till we get into the cut and they'll pull us over again and my name will be tied. Let's put it this way. We were on a plane back. But, someone would call you, hey, one time someone called me up and he goes, hey, there's an offload. We got 600 or 800 pounds stuck in a boat sitting in Lantana Marina. All right, we'll grab it. Me and my buddy go up there, one morning and unload it. So you're always looking for a move, right? And cocaine started permeating I'll tell you something funny about that. We got there late. We went out partying all night, got there late. We go to back the truck up to the boat. The boat's on stilts on the marina, and we're unloading it. And there's people walking around. There's like a guy with his kid. And he's watching us unload the boat. I see him just grab the kid and walk him away. And we're pulling out. I'm in a chase car. He's in the truck. We always try to use a chase car, like if something happens, we can knock the car off, to ram the cops, something, ditch the truck, get away.
Right.
And the owner of the marina is talking to the U.S. Customs or the cops. Like, he's stopping them. Like, hey, what's going on? They're having this conversation, and we just pull out, and I go, oh, fuck. We were minutes away from that guy pulling around the corner and seeing us unload that boat. And but those things, listen, the thing people have to understand about a smuggling trip or a drug deal in general, we have a term for drug deals. They're called DDDs, delayed dope deals. When is it going to happen? 5 times longer. If you're trying to buy a gram, it's going to take 3. It always takes longer. It's not like drug dealers are on time. I mean, they have a schedule to keep, or they're responsible business people. And so I always used to say that even the tightest smuggling operations, and I've been involved in very professional smuggling operations, there's still things come up. There's DDDs, delayed dope deals. There's military operations, hurry up and wait. The plane crashes in Colombia, this, that. It's never as simple as it sounds,
right?
Rarely. So as they're making it harder and harder to smuggle weed, now they're crushing, boats are getting caught with 50,000 pounds, hundreds of thousands. People, and the Colombians, and, Carlos Leader and Pablo Escobar and all these guys are now becoming, the cocaine thing's building. They're realizing there's a lot more money in smuggling coke. It's a kilo of cocaine is the size of like a brick, like a couple books, right?
Right.
A pound of weed, well, to put it into blunt standards, a 50-pound bale of marijuana at that time was worth between 10 to 12 grand, right? Think about what 50 pounds of coke was worth. That's 25 kilos. When I started selling coke, a kilo was $60,000. Could be 57 to 60,000 for a pure Kia Coke. Now, to put the money value into it, if somebody put a kilo of coke in a false bottom suitcase, brought it to America, and it was pure coke back then, before even the Colombians cut it in Colombia, or because of the volume of making it caused the quality to go down. The first coke we used to get was beautiful. It's like shale, Peruvian flake. You just pop it off. It was beautiful. The high was so clean. And as it became more prolific, the quality came down, and, because of a couple things we can go into. But if you cut a pure kilo of coke 4 to 1, you can make $250,000, right? You're talking about 460,000 kilos or 50,000. Let's say you make $250,000 on if you went to Peru and you picked one up for $5,000 or $3,000 and turned it into 250,000. So drug dealers got really rich quick, right? So then when the Colombians started seeing that how much Americans were selling it for in America, and the other thing is coke wasn't grown in Colombia back then. it was in Peru and Bolivia, and they have to smuggle the leaves or the basa or the paste into Colombia or make it in Peru. So that's the origination of the drug business. So the reason we have to bring the weed and the coke out of Colombia is the closest South American coastline to America. It's about 1,500 miles. So it's a lot easier to smuggle it from Colombia than from Peru or Brazil or Bolivia. So getting back to what happened. So Carlos later, George Young,
Yep.
Pablo Escobar and his team start figuring out how valuable coke is in America. Grisolo Blanco, the Black Widow. So that's when the proliferation of the cocaine and the pot smugglers are like, hey, I'll smuggle coke. We're doing it.
Why not?
By the way, we're all sniffing coke. It's the party drug of the 80s. If you look in Die Hard, the movie, right? What does the one guy try to offer the Hans, whatever his name is?
Yeah.
Comes out a little blow. Hey, you want to do a couple lines?
Yeah.
Then he shoots him in the head.
Yeah.
So, it was everywhere. Studio 51 in New York. Coke's been around. The Three Stooges and Charlie Chaplin tell stories of going to Hollywood parties and there being like bowls of pure coke and nobody really cared.
Yeah.
But what I say in my book, One Step Over the Line, Confessions of a Marijuana Mercenary, available on Amazon, Kindle, and my website, onestepoverline.com. Shameless plug.
Shameless.
Is a couple things. One is, and I say this in the beginning, how did they not know? 1973 was the big push for the crackdown on drugs, right? The first laws against marijuana were 1939, I think, but 36 or 39, but 1973. Just 50 years earlier was Prohibition. And Prohibition built Vegas and built the mob. Before Prohibition, the mob had rackets, this, that. When Prohibition came around, they had alcohol, they had casinos, speakeasies. All that stuff didn't exist until they made alcohol illegal. So and then that is what the Vegas wouldn't, not only me, but you'll hear people like, what's his name, Franchisi.
Mike French.
I said his name wrong. And other guys say, everybody admits, if it wasn't for Prohibition, the mob never would have been built to the size and scope of what it was.
Yeah, I agree.
So going forward, that same thing happened with drugs. The more they tried to stop marijuana, the more they put up walls, two things happened. And the country's insatiable demand, supply and demand. The ex-president of the former president of Mexico and the current president of Colombia both said the same thing. We don't have a drug problem. America does.
Yeah.
We're just, unfortunately, the middleman.
Yeah.
They go, Colombians don't really smoke weed. They think you're a loco if you smoke weed, and cocaine's benign. Here's the insatiable market. Europe is the insatiable market. Australia now, New Zealand, these are insatiable markets for coke. And so by putting a wall up, you built these cartels, and in a sense, armies willing to kill us to keep the dollar going. Mm-hmm. Remember, wars are fought over ideology. Mm-hmm. They're started over money and power. People die in war over ideology. Mm-hmm. And I know this is going to be a digress, but look at the Civil War. The Civil War, the ideology was slavery. The reality of it was money. The South was making cotton. Cotton at the time was considered the gold all over the world. Everybody wanted American cotton. The South wanted to sell cotton to Europe directly. The original, untaxed. The North realized, wait a second, the South's got an economy that's going to supersede our industrialist economy, and they got free labor. Take away the slavery, take away the free labor, and I'm not saying that the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. Slavery is abhorrent, horrible, thank God. But was the real driver money? and was the underlying fact. The slavery you saw, it was brutally obvious. The money was the undercurrent.
Right.
Right. So in the drug world, to turn it back, building, putting up these walls, and building the price up. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I said earlier, when I first started selling coke in ounces and grams, I couldn't afford a kilo. I was a kid. They were 57 to 60,000. When we did we could talk about this trip. We did a trip where we bought 300 kilos in from, and we landed on a road in Florida. My cost, and I'm on the runway, so I'm getting the right cost, right? I was paying $10,000 a kilo, but guess what I sold it for to my buyer? 11.
Oh,
That's the market wasn't. Maybe I could have gotten 12. The market was that tight because there was so much coke in America. Remember how in the marijuana days there'd be hundreds of thousands of pounds of weed? So there's so much weed in America right now that people are smuggling it out of the country. There's weed going to England, going to the islands. There is so much weed because of the legal and gray market and illegal grows. So again, going back, the law of supply and demand comes in.
Absolutely.
So the more the demand came up, the more the suppliers, and the bigger we're building these drug cartels right at our back door, Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, that will kill or be, and their value of life. And by the way, look at the other thing we're doing. If you get caught, you're getting 15 to 25 years. Yeah. You could kill your wife and get less time.
Yeah.
I was looking at 25 years for weed, RICO. At that point, you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So, but that's just a little overview of the drug world and the drug business.
You were referencing earlier the first time you got busted on a run. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So later, I started selling drugs in 73, and I got busted in 88. So that was a pretty good run. My good friend Bob Silverbullet, who was in my book everywhere. He's also in several other books. He was a prolific smuggler. A good friend of mine, Cecil Rogers, wrote a book, Ride the Tide. And it turns out all the people in my book are in Cecil's book, but he just changed the names to different names. I didn't realize it. I go, Bob Silverbullet. I go, no, that's not a name that we both know that guy. He's a good friend of mine, a big-time mentor. He was a pilot, a sailboat captain, really seasoned smuggler. So Bob calls me up, and he goes, hey, Bruce, I'll say Goodwin, is this South African or English, proper gentleman. Bruce was a smuggler from the get-go. And he had a Beech 18, twin-engine Beech 18 plane. Then I don't think he had a pilot's license. I swear to God. We were talking about Bob because I don't think he has. I don't think he does either. Bruce had 40,000 pounds stuck in Canada. So he'd run a ship up to Canada to avoid the American customs coastlines, right? The farther north you go, the more the weed's worth. Remember, I'm taking weed from Florida, sending it to upstate New York or Ohio and getting my profit. He goes all the way to Canada, so it should be valuable. But there's something, the pot is horrible. It doesn't get a flea high. Now, maybe he couldn't sell it up there. He had it there for like a year in a freezer inside a fish packing plant. 40,000 pounds, I want you to think about how much that is. If a bale is this big and it's 50, there's 200 bales. That's like, when you go into a room with 40,000 pounds, you're usually climbing up the mountain.
Yeah.
Like they're stacked up and you're climbing the stack. Tommy Powell in his book, Reefer, talks about being in Colombia and sleeping on 1 million pounds of weed. Jeez. Out in the woods. But so 40,000 pounds is in Canada. At this time, Bob had a seaplane. So that seaplane doesn't carry a lot. The other problem with a seaplane is you can't make a runway at night. Like if we'll go back and talk about the when we brought in the 300 kilos of coke, because that's a great story. But in the 300 kilos of coke, we built a runway on a road in the middle of the night by lighting it up, clandestinely. On a seaplane, can't land at night. You have to be able to look at the water so the pontoons don't dig in. And if there's some guy out there fishing at night, you'll both die.
Yeah.
So we have to do it in broad daylight. So what we agreed to do is we go set up camp in Maine. We have 2 houses. We go up there for months to acclimate, right? We're checking on the trucks. We got trucks with campers. We're starting to dress more, flying to Florida, but coming back is dressed like the locals, and the people we brought with us were all myself. I brought another guy, Keith, another guy, Bob Silverblood. We're all really handy. Like we could build something, fix something, even them more so than me, but because you never know what's going to come up, right? And what we end up doing is we put 200 pounds at a time in the plane in duffel bags, not in bales, so that he could fly in and you wouldn't see, if you look through the window, you wouldn't see the plane. It looks like you're moving gear. It's not uncommon, especially in those areas or Alaska or the islands, to take the seats out of the plane because it's a pickup truck at this point. So what we did there was I got in the truck. I drove up these mountain roads, these logger loads, parked myself out in the woods, grab a book like I'm out there just reading, killing time. And obviously I'm reading because I'm killing time, waiting for and because we never know how it's going to go. And I remember one time seeing a bunch of big moose tracks and moose piles. And I'm like, moose are not friendly. Like they're 2,200 pounds of, I'll run your ass over. So now I'm sitting on top of the truck reading the book going, you're a moosey. So note to self, don't stand around. He flies in the plane, and then we did a couple different. One time we did it using a rubber dinghy. Another time he just brought the plane as close, and I waited out. And we did about 5 or 6 of those, got 1,400 pounds. So, and I mean, my deal there is I'm not getting paid to do the offload. I'm part of the team. Whatever we get, I'm going to get the weed wholesale and sell it because I have Terry in Ohio and other avenues. So we're bringing the trip in. We're going to get 1,400 pounds, do 5 or 6 of those, and then if it's selling, we'll figure out another way to do it. Either keep doing that, or we'll, use trucks, or we'll find another. But we just want to see if the 40,000 we could sell. Couldn't sell it. I drove it to Ohio. I did everything. Couldn't sell it. So I told those guys, this weed's unsellable. You can smoke a whole bale and not get high. And so in the book, there's several chapters on this, but it's called, the first chapter is Why I Never Work on a Holiday. I was sworn to never work on my birthday or a holiday. The reason being is I don't want to end up in jail on my birthday or on a holiday when you can't get bonded out because there's no judge around.
Right.
And the police present on a holiday, even though we tried to do another smuggling trip on Christmas Eve, and that didn't work. But I just was committed not to doing it. So months go by, and we got this weed stashed in a warehouse in Maine. So Bob and Bruce go, look, Kenny, why don't you do this? Fly up there, load it up, and bring it to D.C., because Bob had a guy down there named Tom. He said he thought he could sell it. I go, listen, I know Tom. Tom can't sell it. I can't sell it. Nobody could sell it. But okay, it's 4th of July weekend. And I had a guy, this is 1988, so we're starting to, things are slowing down. We're not moving big loads of weed anymore. We're moving 100-pound loads of high-end weed. It's going more sensimilla, more quality, not the 1,000 pounds of the $245 weed. Now I'm moving 100 pounds of $800 weed. Didn't matter to me. I'm making the same basic money, right? So now I'm making $800 a pound instead of $40 a pound. So, but we still can sell I still sell that. So, I call my driver. His nickname was Number One, and he was my best buddy, and he had got out of the business. He had moved to upstate New York, got a job. His father was a police officer. His brother got busted bringing a load of weed into port and got out of it. I guess think he just had enough. Moves up, and he was my number one driver. So I call him up. I go, hey, buddy, it's 4th of July. What are you doing? He goes, I'm coming home. I got 2 weeks off. Coming to Florida. I go, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you do me a favor? Meet me in Maine. Well, I got this load of weed, and I'm putting it into a U-Haul truck. All you have to do is fly up to Boston or whatever I decided. I'll pick you up at the airport. You're going to take me down to upstate New York where I'm going to, he had a house up there. We'll rearrange, we'll let me off there. I'm going to go to New York City. You drive it to D.C. and I'll pay you $2,000 instead of $1,000 because it's a truck. He goes, no, man, I'm out of it. I go, I'm going to give you $2,000 and I'll pay for all your expenses, a plane ticket, first class, whatever you want to do. Just help me out. Boy, did I fuck up his life. So he meets me. We get in the truck. We're driving through Massachusetts late at night. And again, why I never work on a holiday. We light up a joint and we're smoking it and getting really good buzz, throw the roach out the window, cruising along. All of a sudden I see rollers. The cops are behind us. And I'm not speeding. I'm not doing anything wrong. So it turns out that Maine legally sold fireworks, but Massachusetts just passed a law saying that they're not allowed. Mm-hmm. And it was July 1st, I think. And this guy thought we had a truckload of fireworks. So he pulls me over. It's raining. He goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm moving furniture to my brother's house in Connecticut. He goes, well, you're on the wrong road. Connecticut's that way. You're going this way. I go, I'm lost. I go, shit. All right, well, and I go, look, it's raining. I'm late. Can you just give me a ticket and let me go? And he goes, what's in the truck? And I go, furniture, man. I told you I'm moving. And he pulls his gun and he goes, open the truck. And now what am I going to do? So I open the truck and I had taken the time to put the weed in boxes. I wrapped it in plastic bags, like big, put bounce fabric softener and carpet fresh in every box. That's what you do to kill the smell.
Right.
Boxed them all up, put them in the back of the truck all myself. I just picked Rick up at the airport. So we get busted. We spend 5 days in a fucking holding cell on the side of the road where no food. They had to used to go to Burger King and there's no amenities, no showers, just a drunk tank. Cop picks us up, the guy that arrested us, Trooper Mark Lynch. And you can Google him. He had an interesting life. And takes us to court where I try to, the thing about a drug deal, the one thing you never, and I was trained, remember I had people that had been my mentors, never say you can make bond. Mm-hmm. Because if you do, you're the big guy. So I go up in front of the judge, and I go, Your Honor, he goes, $40,000 each. And I go, I don't have that money. I don't have any money. I don't know anything about this. I have a AAA card. They have offer bond. And the judge looks at me. He goes, son, I don't believe the American Automobile Association had that in mind when they offered the bond. So we get in the car, and the cop looks at us, and he's got, when he's square-jawed, trooper hats on, total asshole, and looks over his seat like this, with a big grin, and me and Rick are sitting in the back seat. He goes, you know where you're going now? Lawrence House of Detention. And we're like I've never been to I'm not vacationing here. I don't really know my way around, you know? He goes, they don't even have flushing toilets. You have to shit and piss in buckets. And me and Rick are like, oof.
Oh, boy.
So we get there, and this prison was built in 1863. And, when prisoners were prisoners and slaves were slaves, and it looked like something out of an old cowboy movie. Like they had just gotten the doors that operated electronically. Before that, they used to have the screws used. The reason they call guards screws is because they come in with the key and, well, actually, somebody told me that's not the true reason. There's some English reason, but that's what we always used to believe. Anyway, they got flushing toilets. We were there, brand new installed, stainless steel combo model, the little toilet with the sink above.
Attached to it.
Yeah, I said, I'm going to get one of those for the house. I go, thank God they did. But it was like 4 guys to a cell that was meant for 2. My bed was so high up because, the new guy always gets the top bunk.
Yeah.
That all I can remember seeing was a light bulb next to my head and a rat hole about this big. And there was no, I was only there for 2 weeks, but there was no clothes. Like, you didn't get clothes. They didn't have, I don't know how they fed us. I don't remember even showers. I guess there was. But it was just a hell. I remember my brother had to bring me clothes from Connecticut. And one of the things he brought me was these, he was my brother, just probably grabbed whatever he could off the floor, these green shorts. I mean, I remember one of the other prisoners coming up to me going, hey, I got to tell you something. You look awful cute in those little green shorts. I go, fuck off. I mean, he was being funny. But so we spent 2 weeks in there, and it was a hellhole. I mean, it was just, I mean, nobody was horrible. Everybody got along. I mean, it was so fucking hot. It was the hottest. I Googled it. The hottest summer it had been, this is 1988, since 1863 when they built the jail.
Wow.
Yeah, no air conditioning. I'm on the ground tier. There's 3 tiers. So one time my cellmate, Jose, who was the toughest little Puerto Rican guy, I mean, this guy was just, he goes, hey, and there's like 30 guys sitting around he goes, I'm going to play cards. I go, yeah, sure. He goes, my game's called push-ups, and I'd never seen this before. They take a deck of cards, and I had been jet skiing and working out, so I was in good shape. Not Jose's shape. Jose's like a guy, he was in there for stabbing his pregnant wife 7 times in the stomach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That'll get you in there.
Yeah, I said to him, I go, Jose, he goes, Florida. He used to call me Florida. He goes, hey, Florida, don't worry. We will be a family once again when I get back. And she didn't die, neither did the baby.
Jeez.
I go, oh, she's an understanding woman, And
yeah, that could cause a problem in my house.
But I'll tell you something. There was something else that happened. I won't get into it. It's in the book, but about this guy dying and his family and everything. Well, I can talk about it, but Jose looked at me one day and he gave me some life advice. I lost my father at 13, my grandfather at 12. Had a lot of loss since then in my life, between friends dying in drug deals and murders and, age and cancer and stuff. He said, hey, Florida, people die every day. Now, I don't know why he was telling me that. I don't know if he was going to, when you're in jail, you're going, is there a reason you're telling me that? Am I dying next? But it was, everything in life, you got to learn. And that was it helped me. It helped me realize that as much as painful loss is, it's just part of the life experience, Yeah. So he also told me, after about 3 days, he looks at me and goes, hey, Florida, you haven't shit since you got here. He goes, you better take a shit. That was his other good advice. So I'm waiting until the middle of the night, right? And I go, all right. So I climb down the 4 bunks like nobody's going to know, right? And nobody sees the guy. I go sit on the new stainless steel model, and I start taking a deuce. And all of a sudden I hear Jose yell, hey, man, emergency, in his broken Puerto Rican English, emergency flush. So I hit the button because I owed it to him, right? He's been good to me. So back to the card game. He goes, we're going to play push-ups. And, I'm like, what's that? He goes, well, so what you do is you take a deck of cards, and I think I did the math. There's like 445 push-ups in the deck or something. And whatever the card is, you do that many push-ups.
Yeah.
And then Jack is 10, and then Jack, Queen, King is 10, 11, 12, I think it was. And then Ace is 15. Mm-hmm. So we start flipping cards. And all of a sudden, it's a scene out of a prison movie. Like, I got my shirt off. He's got his shirt off. All the guys are standing around. They're trying to bet because nobody has any money. I don't know what they're betting, but, they're all rooting for their different, and we're doing push-ups, man, and we're clicking them off. And we're almost through the deck. I mean, we probably did close to a couple hundred each. And all of a sudden, I get like a 10. And the way it works is if you don't do your all, let's say you get a 10, and then I get some high card. If you don't do it, if you owe the push-ups on the next hand.
Right.
So let's say you get to 7, and then he goes and he does his full count, whatever his card was. So his card then was a fairly low card, and then I get my next card, and I think it was a face card. And I'm like, fuck, I just collapsed in a pool of dirt and sweat, but the rest of the people in the jail in that tier, like they respected me.
Oh yeah.
They like, this guy can, not only was but Jose was also, you always look after your cellmate. You try.
Right.
Either you kill him or you care for him, right?
Yeah.
So Jose was always good to me. And so here's a story I wasn't going to tell, but I'll tell it because we're talking. So what happened was we went to bond. Remember the original bond was $40,000 each?
Right.
Well, the new bond was $80,000 for both of us. It was $40,000 each. They didn't lower it. So I called my brother. I go, hey, we got to get $80,000. So he starts running around trying to get the money. I said, just go to Florida. I got like $40,000 in my closet. One time I went out drinking with my buddy and this little girl I'd kind of been dating, was like had the key to my house, kind of my girlfriend. She came in, calls me up. I think I had a beeper. I don't think I had a car phone yet. I don't remember. And she's like, hey, there's $80,000 in a paper bag in the closet. I'm not happy about this because that's putting me in the middle. And I go, oh, fuck, I forgot about that. I had $80,000 in a garbage bag, And then, and then another time a friend of mine goes, hey, do you have a light bulb, for the bathroom? We were just hanging around smoking weed in the apartment or the house I had. I go, yeah, underneath the cabinet. Pulls out a light bulb and pulls out $10,000 cash. And I go, shit, I forgot about that. Now remember, that's like $30,000 or $40,000 today.
Right.
Just forgetting about it, so bookkeeping may not have been my strong part, it turns out, if you look back. So my brother, I said, look, you got to get the cash. So he got some money up. He went to Florida. He's flying from Connecticut to Florida, everything to get $80,000. Gets there, does 100 miles an hour up there, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm getting out. He's got the cash. They call me up, and this jail was built in the 1800s. This is 88. They didn't have computers. This is just guys, with the logbook and stuff. And I see my brother, and I walk over to the bars. He's on the outside, the street side. I'm up where the guards are on the prisoner side, and there's these the typical black bars, and there's a woman and her 2 little daughters, all dressed in matching sundresses, probably 7, 10, and the woman's probably in her 30s. And there's a guy, and I don't realize it. The guy's on the floor having a heart attack. This is how we can turn from, and I don't even care. Like, all I find out is the guards aren't going to take the $80,000. They wanted a check. And there's no way he's going to get a check. So I'm basically stuck there for another weekend. And I'm not leaving without my guy. Eric called me up because I can get 40 right now and get you out. I go, I'm not leaving without Rick. I promised Rick to stick with me and not to turn me in and not to turn on me, and I would get him out of this. The last thing I'm going to do is leave him there. Yep. You could take Rick out and leave me. But you're not taking, my brother wouldn't do that. So anyway, I'm actually climbing over the guy, jumping on the bars, trying to talk to my brother, and jumping back and forth and I can see him just on the ground, just foam coming out of his mouth in the fetal position. And the guards are just looking at him going, ma'am, all we can do is give him a baby aspirin and call 911. I mean, this guy's not going to make that. Can you imagine the pain of being a little girl, 2 little girls and their mother, and watching your father dying on the other side of steel bars and nobody's doing anything? And to boot, there's some lunatic jumping back and across kind of over his body, like pulling on the bars trying to get out. Like I'm climbing the bars trying to get out. And so I just, not my proudest moment, but I think if you want to know the story of what it was like, then I got to be honest about that one too, you know.
Right.
And later that night, the prisoners decided that it was so hot they should burn the jail down and maybe we'll all get out. And so the third tier guys, where it's hotter up on top than the bottom, are throwing paper. You know, back then, that's when you had cigarettes and matches. They don't do that shit anymore. They're trying to light the 50-gallon garbage cans on the floor on fire. They figure if they can throw a lit match or a piece of paper, and they're all yelling. And again, mostly a Puerto Rican community. So I go, Jose, what are they? And he tells me they're trying to light the 50-gallon drums on fire. And I'm watching the fire. It's dropping down out of the sky like fireflies, like little snowflakes. Like there's, I don't know, like hundreds, or just whatever. It's just falling down. And I go, Jose, you do realize that may not work. I mean, we could die of smoke inhalation before they get us out of here. There's no guarantee they're going to open the fucking doors.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I almost want to start like, you know, like no. And they didn't do it. Went that following Monday or Tuesday and bonded out. About a month later, my co-defendant in the case sends me a little newspaper article. And back then, we didn't have the internet. He put it in the mail and mailed it to me. And it shows they burned the jail down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a bunch of prisoners got out. Then they water cannoned them, and the fire department came. And nobody breached the prison, you know, walls, the fences. But they burned down half the prison.
So they did finally get it burned down.
Yeah, they finally got it burned down. I was like, thank God we got out of there. But let me get a sip of water. But those are the beginning days of my drug dealing.
So if you had to say, what was like the slickest way y'all hid stuff in your smuggling? And this could be for the, you know, the pot or the coke.
Yeah. So, you know, really, there's so many. So going into the history of it, you know, the Colombians would put it in concrete pillars. They put it in wood and fruit, and now they use it in narco submarines, which are really effective. We didn't really hide it. We were the guys that threw it in the boat and came in, you know. I mean, even on the road, like people would take Winnebagos and put weed or coke inside the, you know, that was in the walls or in the underneath. But what we did was just threw it in the trunk of the car and went, you know. And most of the time, that's what we do. You know, maybe sometimes we put on a suit and tie. If we're in a city environment. Sometimes, I mean, there's been times when I've been moving a couple kilos around Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
I'd go to, let's say I had to go pick it up, you know, in Boca, you know, at one of my connections. So I drive up in my BMW wearing a nice, you know, outfit, then go home, go in my pickup truck and put on some overalls to go out to the country to sell it.
Right.
So that's, you know, you just kind of want to chameleon. You know, if you're in another city, dress like the people in the city, you know.
Right.
Try to match it all up. I'll tell you, let's see, I told you we brought 600 pounds in. We busted that one, came down, busted. I'll tell you a cocaine smuggling story.
All right.
So this gives you an idea how a trip is put together. So Nathan comes to me, one of my friends, big smuggling guys, and goes, Kenny, I need to get 300 kilos out of Colombia. You know anybody can load me in Colombia? And I go, I might. Let me talk to my friend Ronnie Vest. And Ronnie Vest was so right about now, this is 85, 86, I'm racing cars. I'm spending $6,000 a weekend, $10,000 a weekend going racing. Because, you know, we were talking about Randy Lanier going racing.
Yep.
And Randy, it wasn't a front. It was, you know, he had all these millions and millions of dollars. He was a really good race car driver. You know, he won the championship, came in as Rookie of the Year at Indy. If anybody doesn't go to Netflix and see the Bad Sport and his Need for Weed segment, they're just missing a story.
Yeah, 100%.
Really and truly. Or get his book if you read Randy Lanier. It's published by a major publishing house, easy enough to find. But so Nathan says I need 300 kilos. Ronnie had been busted on a trailer, a trawler bringing some weed out of Colombia. And what would happen back then when an American gets busted, they send them back to America,
Right.
right? Now they're trying to get Escobar out of Colombia, or one of the. There's America saying, "Why come you're not extraditing your people to us?" America's asking them to extradite their people back to America, where they can get real time, versus in Colombia buying off the judges, threatening to kill the judges, or building their own prisons like Escobar did with his own entrance and all that stuff. So they decide that Ronnie's going to be the one guy they send back. He was the first guy they said, all right, you can have, and he's just Ronnie's like a mild-mannered, he's not some big smuggler. He's like from Louisiana with me. He's just, his parents were calm little, this is like understand what I talk about in the book. None of us came from crime families like our fathers were criminals. Most of us, our fathers were, postmen, police officers, the deli owner. We were just middle-class kids growing up in the sleepy little town of Fort Lauderdale, or in our case, Hollywood, Florida, at a time when this war on drugs exploded under our feet. And I am telling you, everybody I knew was selling drugs to somebody. It was hard to find a buyer. A consumer.
Right.
Everybody was a seller, and everybody had an angle. And so Ronnie gets extradited back down to Colombia, right? And he's in jail there, and Colombian prisons are different. Like on Saturday and Sunday, they open the jail up, and all the townspeople come in, and your family comes in. You have conjugal visits, at least where he was. He had a hamburger stand. He would make money selling hamburgers. The kids are playing, and it's more humane, right? And so he does 2.5 years there. Actually meets his wife, moves back to America with her, and has 2 kids. So at this point, he's not married yet or anything. He says, hey, I set it up, because he met so many people in Colombian prison. That's how, if you read, you'll study George Young and Carlos Leader, who were the forefathers of the big cocaine into America thing. They met in jail.
Yeah.
Yep. So Ronnie sends me down to Miami, and there's a guy down there, and this is not.
I think in Danbury, according to the movie, it was
Danbury,
Danbury.
right? So they're in the softest place.
Yeah.
See, here's what the deal was. People say, well, how come you rolled over? Well, when I started selling drugs, you get 3 years in Eglin Air Force Base if you got caught smuggling. Eglin is like where they put judges and politicians. My one friend got caught doing a ground crew offload. He went to Eglin, and there's no bars, there's no fences. You're in a camp. You practice tennis, work on your chess game. My one friend went to school for pilot's license. So I go, I guess they figured, you don't want to be on the ground crew. You want to, I go, are you going to allowed to fly a plane when you get out? He goes, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure, So I go down to meet this guy with Nathan and this other guy, and Nathan's been made millions of dollars and running. One of the things, just so to clarify, I never really considered myself a smuggler. I always considered myself a drug runner. I was a guy that would move the product. Having said that, when I wrote the book, I realized I did 12 smuggling trips, which is probably triple what most guys do 3 or 4 and get busted. Mm-hmm. The reason I didn't want to do smuggling trips is because there's too many moving parts. I don't want to go sit on a runway and make 20 or 30 grand when I can, as an offloader, when I can just keep doing my daily thing. Yeah. But you make millions if you go for the whole start and complete thing, right? You go down to Colombia, meet the connection. Anyway. So the Colombian comes up, and he's not what people have to understand is these are sophisticated people. He's staying in the Intercontinental Hotel in Miami. He's a well-dressed 40-something-year-old guy, probably owns multiple businesses in Colombia, He's not some, village Indian with a machine gun. And he tells us in this deal, he wanted us to bring between 300 and 400 kilos out. He wanted to own 100 of them, and we would own the difference, and we wouldn't have to pay for them, but we'd be transport. Right. And Nathan really wanted to buy 300 kilos, but of his own. But he was open to doing that. And right in the middle of the conversation, in this guy's hotel room, Nathan pulls out this blunt, this fucking roach that looks like, I mean, like this, and lights it up and starts smoking it, and offers it to me and to the guy, and I think we had one other guy with us, one of our guys. Or maybe it was Ronnie, actually. And the guy turns it down. And I just go, oh, shit. Because what Nathan should have known is the Colombians look at people that smoke weed as loco, unsophisticated, and unprofessional. Mm-hmm. So, and I was just a broker in this deal, but, I was going to make a lot of money.
Right.
And I also would have gotten all the kilos to sell it at cost. So we leave. I get the phone call. The Colombian decided to go with another group. Right. Fine. So a couple weeks later, I get a phone call from Nathan. Hey, I got the 300 keys. How'd you like to help me with the offload? And you can sell. You can have first bite as much of the load as you want at wholesale price. So I didn't want to do the offload. I mean, what am I doing? I mean. But I'm like, wow, all the other guys are doing it. It's like, remember when your mother said, well, if Billy jumps off the bridge, are you going to jump too?
Right.
What's the question? Does he die or he just breaks his legs? Because if he breaks his legs, I'm going to give it a shot. Right. So I'm racing cars, spending like $6,000 to $10,000 a weekend. So I'm like, fuck, I need the money and I'll take the 20 grand. I thought I was going to get, it ended up lowballing me on the offload. But me and like 3 or 4 of my friends, we went out there, and this is how it works. So Nathan goes down to Colombia to take the seats out of the plane, and what he did is you always have to have auxiliary fuel in the plane.
Right.
So it's either going to be a bladder, which is a rubber, looks like a sack. It's like a rubber. It's flat, and as the fuel fills up, it swells up, and then it has a connection for the fuel lines into it. As the fuel comes out, the pressure of the bladder shrinking helps feed the fuel into the vehicle, right? So you don't need a fuel pump as much because the bladder's stretched. So now it's going down. Or you can do tip tanks on the plane, which almost everybody had tip tanks, and they had about 100 gallons, 100 and something gallons, depending on the plane. And you can have custom hidden welded auxiliary fuel tanks, which a lot of people, I know people made a lot of money welding fuel tanks for boats and planes. So Nathan went down to Colombia and to get the load and crashed the plane in Colombia. So now he had to come back. I forgot about this part. So what did we do? We had to smuggle Nathan back into America, because what happens is, when you go down to Colombia clandestinely, you don't have a visa, your passport's not stamped, you can't come back. You can't come back on Avianca Airlines, Colombian airline, and the customs in America go, how the hell, where are you from? Right? So what we agree to do is, he's going to smuggle himself back into the Bahamas. We get this other friend of mine who I talk about in the book, Aldo, and Captain Jim, and in my website, if you go to the One Step Over the Line website, you can see a picture of all of us on the dock. Not Nathan, but a bunch of Captain Jim and Aldo, and and my partner Terry. We went fishing. Anyway, we go out in the middle of the ocean, and we go to the Bahamas, and we're on this 56-foot sport fish that we chartered to go pick up Nathan and smuggle him back into America. So that's what we had to do. We actually got run down by the U.S. Navy in a hydrofoil, and ended up throwing all our blow overboard. Not, just to party with blow, which was, that kind of ruined the weekend, any other weekend in Bahamas. But anyhow, we managed. And we smuggled Nathan back in, because Nathan's also on the run from another case.
Right. So
then Nathan goes back to Colombia, but this time the Colombian's going to let him use a plane, but he has to pay for it. Now his cut saving, right? Because he wrecked his plane. And what they did was, just to tell you how crazy, how much balls people have, they put like 6 plastic jugs in the back of the plane, 30-gallon, 50-gallon drugs. And what they do is, they had rubber hoses going into the fuel or the engines of the plane. And so the pilot's flying, the co-pilot, when the plane starts sputtering and running out of fuel, the co-pilot takes the rubber, there's brass rods that are the length of, let's say if it's the tank's 3 feet, the rods are 3 feet. The hoses get dropped into the first set of tanks. It sucks the fuel out of them. Then when that plane, the engine starts going bap, 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 take the hoses and drop them into the second tank. Third tank, set of tanks, 6 tanks. So probably 300 gallons because you got to fly 1,500 miles. So we're waiting. We've been up for days eating speed. And one of our friends was an Army Ranger. He was a Special Forces. So the guys traded him coke for Claymore mines, hand grenades, M16s, Laws rockets. We had all that shit. But on the runway, I had a pistol, Bowie knife. Big Jeff was guarding the back of the runway with an M16. I go into it in great detail in the book. And we all have hand grenades. I mean, what the fuck were we thinking? What am I thinking? I don't even do this shit. I don't need to be a smuggler. I'm making a bunch of money being a drug runner. But, hey, sounded like fun. Part of the thing I think people have to understand that people that do this stuff, it's an adrenaline rush.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I'm an adrenaline junkie, That's why I race cars. That's why, I like speed. So Nathan tells the story. So the way we do it is we have these little things called fireflies, and they were like the first LED lights. Again, this is 1985. And they're so bright when you hook them like a little 9-volt battery on the bottom of them, and they flash, and they're wicked bright. Then we have other lights that are used if you fall overboard. So they're strobe lights again. And we have those, and then we have glow sticks, or the Calium glow sticks, the sticks you break. Yep. And we have those on fishing lines. So they run out like 10 feet each. So we're sitting in the woods probably 6-7 hours. I don't know how many hours we were out there. And a road to nowhere, like a road in the middle of nowhere in Florida. I remember looking out, I could see shrimp boats, so we're near the water, but that's about it. Or whatever boats, shrimping or Alaskan king crab leg. Stone crab, sorry, wrong coast. And all of a sudden we get the click, click, click. So we all click, click, click. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. That means we have radio silence. That's to let us, we're all checking in. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it comes over the radio, hang fire, which was the code to set up the runway. And then within a couple minutes, me and my other buddy run down the runway, dropping the Calium sticks, and then we've set up so we have a light going all the way down the middle of the road. It's a road, dead dark, pitch black. And we have the strobe lights on the side, so the guy knows where he can land right in. Nice. Nathan told me after the story, he turned to the pilot and goes, or his co-pilot and goes, "Look, it's MIA, Miami International Airport." He goes, "And I know fucking customs." And so we land. He lands it. This happens in minutes. We set up the runway. I run back. We have a car set up, actually my car, that we set up with there's an old rum runner's trick or moonshiner's trick. You shut off a switch to shut off the rear tail lights. That way, if someone's following you and you want to ditch the car, you shut off the tail lights. They can't see you. Mm-hmm. You can shut off the headlights. So that car's got that switch on it. And I run up and I go. Now remember, we're high on speed for days. It's in the middle of the night. It's pitch black. It's the thick, heavy air of the Keys. of the swamps, and I'm flying, man. And and again, the runway is like 2 football fields. Like, it's at least, a couple thousand feet. Right? You need about 1,400 feet to land the plane, roughly, safely, theoretically, and take off. So we set up the runway. I run back. I get the load car. I come driving back towards the plane, and I have no idea. I can't see because I've been looking at those fireflies in my highly dilated, speed-induced eyes. I don't know, whatever they would be. I don't know if that's true, but I couldn't see. And I just remember going through the mist and going, "Kenny, you better slow down somewhere because there's a plane somewhere in this." And I slam on the brakes right in front of the plane. We load the 300 keys into my trunk, I have the chase car behind me, and we blast down to Fort Lauderdale. And I remember they didn't tell me there was a checkpoint. So I see the chase car go through the checkpoint, the lead car, and the old man stick his head out waving, and I just went right by, boom. Now, so my deal with that was $20,000 and all the keys I could sell at runway price, and I did really well with it because I actually got an award for the top salesman. Gave me a little plaque, so as a joke, a picture of some, but so we went. Even though these is shit I never do, I don't have it to do it. I have my own money, my own gigs. We went back to do it again like 6 weeks later, and Nathan never made it. He crashed in Colombia.
Wow.
Fireball. Overweight. I don't know what happened.
Overloaded the plane.
Yeah, I guess. They have 2 pilots, 300 to 400 kilos of coke, which is like 800 pounds, 800 pounds, plus all the fuel. The fuel weighs 8 pounds a gallon, I believe it is. So now you got another, and the fuel shifts, weight shifts, runways are short. Maybe caught a wheel because that can happen. It's all dirt roads, And what they do down there is they have a front end loader on the runway, and they just bury the pilot, the co-pilot. What I heard, there was nothing left but his backbone and. They just
rough. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it hurt. It still hurts. I mean, he was a good friend of mine, but that's. By the time I graduated high school, I had friends that died in DC-3s.
Yeah.
People that got murdered in Colombia.
Well, there's a lot of stories. I don't know if you ever watched that movie, Cocaine Bear.
Yeah,
but it was actually based on a true story. Not the part about the bear killing people. The bear did eat the blow, and he died of a massive heart attack. But in the beginning, it shows a guy jumping out of a plane and then basically planting in somebody's driveway. I think his name was David Howard Thornton, and his plan was to tell the Colombians, hey, I got chased by the feds and I jumped out, I saved what I could, but the plane blew up with all the rest of the stuff. What he did was throw them out over this park, and then he jumped out with some on his person, but that overweighted the, I guess, whatever the limit was for the chute, and the chute didn't work properly, and he basically splatted in somebody's driveway.
Right.
So the blow was found by a bear. The bear ate it and then died immediately of a massive heart attack. Obviously, with the movie, they,
I know the movie. They made
a little bit.
They made a Cocaine Bear 2.
Yeah.
So
have they?
Yeah. So the story. Then Hollywood's got to.
Yeah.
No, but I know the story. Yeah. You got it clear. Yeah.
And that guy, oddly enough, one of his big customers was a man named Jimmy Chagra.
Yeah.
And I don't know if are you familiar with Jimmy?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and a lot of people are.
His brother was a big-time lawyer.
Yes, that's right. His brother was a lawyer. I think he wound up getting shot. But Jimmy went on trial with another guy named Charles for killing a federal judge. Jimmy got out because he had Oscar Goodman as his lawyer, which was a famous mob lawyer in New York, went on to be mayor. I've actually interviewed Oscar.
Wow.
But what people don't know is the guy that went on trial with Jimmy, who did go down for the murder, was a man named Charles Harrelson. You probably don't know who Charles Harrelson is. You might, but the average people don't. But you'll know his son because the son is Woody Harrelson, the actor.
Me.
Charles Harrelson was Woody's father, who they say was a hitman for the mob in that whole circuit. And that's what he went to jail for, and he died in prison.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I know that I am interviewing coming up a guy named, I can't even, I'll malign his last name, but he wrote a book called Folly Cove.
Okay.
And in Folly Cove, he's from Texas, and they smuggled this big load of weed in. It's a great book. If you ever see it, it's called Folly Cove. And one of the guys in his group was Jimmy Chagra.
Okay.
And I was talking to Kim the other day about it, and we were talking about Jimmy Chagra, and his brother was a famous attorney. That wasn't involved. The cops went after Jimmy because they thought his brother was involved. His brother had gotten all these big drug criminals off,
right?
And they thought his brother was part of the smuggling group, but he was not.
No, he was just a really good lawyer. He was a sharp lawyer.
But his younger, I guess his brother Jimmy was not. He definitely,
correct.
Yeah, he was part of their group.
They said he would go in casinos and just throw them like a suitcase full of money and just say, "Give me $1 million,"
right?
And then they'd be like, "Well, it was $1.5 million," and he said, "Just keep the 0.5." I mean, that was how he was, just hooking people. I mean, he had so much money, he didn't even care.
Yeah, I've heard that, and there's a friend of mine that you're probably going to want to interview. His name is Bruce Perlowin. He was a big smuggler. He figured out when Florida got hot, because remember, it's 1,500 miles from Colombia's shoreline to Florida. He went through another friend of ours, Darrell Boyd, who was another big-time famous smuggler down here, convinced him to go to California. And Bruce was sending fishing boats from San Francisco to Colombia. And let me explain that to you. Going from Colombia to here and back, I mean, you're in the open ocean, but there's also, you go through, there's some, the seas in the Atlantic are big, but the seas in the Pacific can be much bigger.
Right.
These guys are out there 4,000 miles in the open ocean. And Bruce Perlowin had smuggled in 500,000 pounds.
Wow.
They call him the King of Pot. They did a documentary about him, and he's got a podcast now if anybody gets a chance, the King of Pot. But he was in prison with Jimmy Chagra.
Okay.
At some point he mentions him. I don't know how long, but yeah, he's got great stories. But so that's how we lost Nathan. Nathan died in that plane crash in Colombia. And even when I was doing, I remember getting in trouble one time. I mean, I had, and I think when I went I went to a lawyer, and one of the times, and he said, I said, I don't know what to do. And I've been doing this my whole life. I started as a kid. Now I'm getting in my 30s, And he goes, I don't know. I'd stick to what you're doing. You seem to make a lot of money. I just wouldn't get caught. I mean, that's the advice you're giving a young man, And so here's the story. While I was in trial in Massachusetts, and we ended up beating the case for illegal search and seizure, and because Trooper Lynch had illegally threatened me with a gun, and there was other lies. I mean, he had already had a murder case thrown out prior to mine because of lies, inconsistencies. And my judge, actually, we had to switch judges because the original judge I had is the one that had thrown the murder case out on with Lynch, and so they felt like it would be better to switch judges to the one, right? Because maybe he didn't want to show a pattern of prejudice of Trooper Lynch, and my case was thrown out. But what you do in a drug case when you're fighting it is you want it to go on for years.
Yeah, stretch it out.
Yeah, any case you do, you want to stretch it out 2 years.
Evidence gets lost, people change jobs, people die, people get in trouble, tarnishes the rep. The longer you stretch it, the better.
Exactly. He nailed it. He gave you everything I was about to say. And you don't get in trouble again. You look like a nicer guy. Hey, look, Your Honor. So I'm literally, my Bob Silverbullet had brought in a load of coke, maybe it was 50 keys, I don't know, into D.C. area on one of his planes. So I, at times, was literally going to trial because, the stall is go up if you're hearing, yes, Judge, I'm here, and go home.
Yep.
You'll spend as much money on plane tickets and travel, it's part of the cost. I was literally one point stopping in D.C. wearing the suit that I'm going to go to trial in. And by the way, drug smugglers don't own a lot of suits. And going to a warehouse where he's got in a self-storage warehouse, he has 2 bays, one for the coke, one for the money drop. All I had to do was go over to the one, pull out a couple keys, call either my buyers or one of my runners, give them the coke. They'd run it out to either the customer, whatever, to put the money in the warehouse, in the other warehouse, in the money warehouse, 2 drops, and get back on the plane and fly to court. I'd literally more than once moved the coke I told Bob one time, I go, you understand, I'm out I got busted with 1,400 pounds. They didn't know I smuggled it in. They never knew that. They only thought I was transferring it. They didn't know it was mine. Mm-hmm. So, so I'm actually doing coke deals. I said to Bob, you know what they're going to do to me if I get caught out on bond for 1,400 pounds and I get caught with 5 keys of coke? And but I got to pay my lawyer. Yeah. So I just kept working. And then.
But eventually, though, you do go, because you mentioned earlier, you did flip to the other side for a little bit and work. What led to that?
So in 1990, that was 88. But I spent 2 years. I was 2.5, 3 years in the system between. So then they tried to appeal the case because I ended up giving them 80,000 cash. What you learn out is don't give the cash, put a bondsman in the middle, because the cash they never want to give back.
Right.
And
100%.
actually later on you'd have to prove where you got the cash. I got lucky in '88; they didn't require me to show where I got the money. But later on they'd say, "Hey, no, we're not taking. Your lawyer has to show where the check came from."
Yeah.
So, so it's 1992. I just got married. I had a 1.5-year-old little girl, and I had been fighting. Like I said, I had just gotten out of the '88 bust, like just a couple months earlier. By the time, I mean, I was out, but I was on appeal. They were going to try to retry me, and finally, I'm like, fuck, I got my 80 grand back. That's off my head. I meet this cool chick. We start dating. I'm still running dope while I'm out on paper, and are out on this appeal. And she ends up getting pregnant. So we have a 1.5-year-old little daughter, and we decide to get married. The relationship had been rocky, but, we've been together. We're parenting together. We're living together. She's my girl. She didn't want to get married. I remember what it was. She didn't want to get married pregnant.
Right.
So I'm not going down the aisle with a bump. And she was Playboy bunny built. I'm like, baby, I don't think anybody's going to notice, Beautiful, blonde. Not prettier than my current wife. Let me clarify that. But my current wife is everything. She saved just everything to us as a family. But my first wife was a trouble child. She had a lot of issues and stuff, but beautiful woman. And we get married. And now remember, I just paid for a diamond ring, a wedding, a honeymoon. I'm kind of cash strapped.
Yeah.
I'd actually sold my pickup truck, because I didn't need. I was going to buy a nicer and maybe get something nicer or get a BMW, whatever. And I said, baby, I got to go back to work. We've been kind of doing this, just spent a shit ton of money, and it's 1992. So I think maybe it was 80, 90 grand between the ring, the wedding, the honeymoon. Again, that's a lot of money in that. It's like a couple, 300 grand, 200 grand. And I go, I'm going back to work. I'm going out to Texas to find a load and run it up to Terry in Ohio. She goes, look, don't go. Please don't go. We're married now. We have a little baby. You can get a job. No, she even said, I'll get a job. You can get a job. I like the idea of her getting a job.
Yeah.
That would have been something new. No, but she was a worker. And I go, she goes, we have a baby. She goes, literally said, I'll eat white bread and bologna sandwiches. Just don't go. I went. And what I didn't know was my partner at Ohio was working with another ex-partner of mine, actually the guy that introduced me to my wife, and they had run some huge load up there, and that market wasn't like that anymore. It wasn't that commercial. He brought like 1,000 pounds out of Texas or Mexico, and it just wasn't like that anymore. It was high-end, small, smaller loads, but much bigger profits. And what I didn't know is my partner had gotten busted. So I go out to Texas, load up about 100 pounds. Again, not a lot, but, it was also my first time with these new sellers. So we had a special truck I had built. It looked like a tool truck, it was like a toolbox truck, but it had secret compartments in it. So the floor would slide back, and we could put coke, especially, or weed underneath there, and then you pour diesel fuel and battery acid. I had a driver named Paco, who was a Peruvian guy, which didn't help him in this instance, I'm be sure. And we loaded up, and we head for Ohio. And it's a long drive from Texas border to Ohio. I mean, it takes you, a day just to get and I'll tell you something interesting. We drove by Marion, Illinois, which is where the Marion prison is.
Oh yeah, the rough prison.
Right. And
God, he was.
And Randy was in there at the time, Lanier. And I remember driving by going, or at least I believed he was. He might have been in Colorado at that point. But I'm like, God, Randy's in that fucking jail. I started thinking about, he's in there for life, man. This is shit. What am I, just correlating it all, right? Like, what am I doing? And I get to Ohio, and of course it's a setup. My partner Terry says, well, meet me at a hotel. Like a hotel. Terry had this badass house on like an acre and a half of land. His father had the house next door. They had a barn. It was like a compound. He was a builder. He had gotten into building, so it was badass. Perfect place to do. I go, why am I meeting at a hotel? He goes, he's got 4 kids. The oldest was 10 or 11. He goes, the kids are starting to catch on. I don't want to. And what had happened was this guy, Jonathan Rosenbaum, the prosecutor for this town in Ohio, who you can Google him. I mean, what a ruthless piece of shit. I mean, even the cops nobody liked this guy. He was just, I mean, not saying they don't like him. He was just ruthless, horrible, hard-ass prosecutor. There was no bend. This is what he did this is when people say, well, he snitched, this and that. This is what they did to Terry. And see what anybody watching this video would think, what would they do? They come in at 8 in the morning, the SWAT team, bust in the doors. Terry had some of the weed in the barn. And the barn was on the property line in between the 2 houses. So half the barn was on Terry's property line, half the barn was on his parents'. His parents had nothing to do with this. They were hardworking. He was a builder. He built his life. He was retired. They get his parents. They bring him over to his house. They get him in his underwear on the couch. They got the 4 kids running around, the SWAT team, his wife, and the prosecutor comes in. He goes, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take your house. We're going to take your parents' house. We're going to put your parents in jail. We're going to put your wife in jail. You're going to jail for 25 years for RICO. And he goes, and we're going to make your 4 kids freaking whatever, orphans, whatever. Yeah. He goes, you got 30 seconds. Talk. You're going to cooperate or not? What kind of person would he be if he didn't?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to let his parents lose their house and go to jail, and his kids are going to be orphans. And by the way, when you get to us doing it as long as we did it and as long as we've been in it, we know the rules.
Yeah.
I always knew, I had Randy's brother, Bobby, got busted in that whole thing, his younger brother, and 4 other guys were involved in what they were doing. He was going to get like 12 years. I think it was Bobby, but it was that group. And they all went to the police and said, all right, we'll all turn ourselves in if you give 3 years to each of us. And they did. And they did what? Maybe state. They did 24 months at the time. I think it was the old guidelines.
Yeah, and then bounced out.
Yeah, I'm just saying, instead of you're going to sit there and go, they got our best friend. We all, and what I said to Kenny, Kenny Moore, the guy that was part of that, I go, why did you do that? He goes, well, it's not fair that one of us gets caught and he gets 12 years and the other, we all did the crime together, right? So I'm friends with Terry today. As a matter of fact, he found me on the internet after 30-something years of doing the podcast, called me up, and I'm flying up. His birthday today, so I got to wish him a happy birthday, and I'll be calling him later, wish him a happy birthday, flying up to where he is, and we're going to go spend a couple days together.
And that's the guy that got you set up, and you're good with him like that.
Yeah, it was. We were playing in the same. Nobody put me in jail.
Right.
Kenny Bear put Kenny Bear in jail.
Right.
Kenny Bear made a decision to be a criminal, and the times he could have got out in '88. Before that, when I had to go to Jamaica on the run when I was 19, all the different decisions I made that's my fault.
That's an interesting perspective because I don't know if everybody would look at it like that, but that's an interesting perspective. Right.
That is the truth. Let's go into statistics before I go into my story. And let's go federal because state by state would be different. 97 to 98% of all federal cases are pled out.
Correct.
Right? They don't go to trial.
Yep.
They win 97% of the time.
So your plea's a lot of times a better option.
Yeah, they got you. They don't. My brother was, I know, my older brother was a lawyer for the feds. He's not a criminal lawyer, but when he got out of law school, he told me that. He goes, they have a 98% conviction rate. They don't even charge somebody until they have enough evidence to close them out. So the percentage of people that cooperate are about 85 to 87%. Actually, you're cooperating when there's a plea deal, it's a plea deal. Whether you're giving up your money, your assets, or your best friend. But 87% of the people, 85 to I think 87, actually cooperate or go to work for the feds or do something to turn in, build another case. So that's the reality of it. When people say to me, and I get it, oh, you're a snitch and you're this. I get it. When you're a kid and you break your mom's vase, you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. When you're in grade school and you go into the principal's office, you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. But the reality is, and also the things that times had changed. When I got busted in '88, me and my co-defendant kept our mouths shut. We didn't cooperate. We beat the case and we got out. When I got busted in that hotel room in Lorain, Ohio, and the SWAT team came in and threw me on the ground, I knew instantly Terry was laying next to me. I knew what had happened.
Yeah.
I knew he set me up. And when Rosenbaum came up and had me handcuffed, in the hotel room, and he came up and he goes, and the cops were like, you know who this guy is coming up? It's Rosenbaum. I go, no, you know who he is? And he goes, well, you're going to fight. They had a TV on. We were watching the Steven Seagal karate movie. And I'm like, he's not a really good karate guy, We're like having that, my handcuffed there. And they shut off the TV when Rosenbaum came in. They were all flipped out. And he comes in my face. He goes, you know what you're in trouble for, boy, son? He goes, you're in big trouble. He goes, you're going to do a lot of time. He goes, you better cooperate and cooperate now. And I was from the old school. I also know no matter what deal you make, don't say a word till you get a lawyer, right? Whatever happens, don't say anything. That's the rules. That's the rules. So I just said, I ain't saying nothing. You got the wrong guy. Now, I thought they had me for the 100 pounds in the truck. I didn't know they had 17 people testifying. It was only 3 months later when I finally got my indictment papers. I tell the story that this guy, Bill, the guard Bill, who I kind of liked. I mean, we talked. You're basically locked in for 24 hours a day in a county jail. They bring me out of my cell, and the guy goes, this guy, like, whatever, and he goes, you Ken Bear? And I'm thinking, well, I'm in the cell with this large black guy named John and me. There's no one. Who else could come out here,
Yeah.
And it's not John, it's me. And I go, yeah, and he hands me the indictment papers, and I go to open them, and Bill looks at me and goes, you going to be all right, kid? I go, yeah. He goes, we're putting you on suicide watch tonight. I go, what? What for? He goes, kid, you're looking at 55 years. I'm glad he said 55 because it was unimaginable. That didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think I have international terrorism on there. But when I read the paperwork, it said I had RICO charges, and, that's 25 years.
And so with that, I'm assuming they probably gave you somewhat of the same spiel that they had given Terry, cooperate, do this XYZ for us, or what?
So what happened was, no, they already knew I wouldn't. So, this is what happened. The guy next to me, the cell next to me, had done 15 years in Angola, right? That's an illusion. If anybody doesn't know what that is, Amnesty International rated it one of the worst prisons in the world. It's in a 1,800-acre swamp in Louisiana. They call it the Alcatraz of Louisiana because ain't no way you're getting out. If the snakes don't get you, the gators will, right?
Yeah.
And he was covered in prison tattoos, and he had me go to the library to get a book for him. He got in 15 years, did 15 years for armed robbery, got out, got home to Ohio, and did another armed robbery. He was institutionalized, and he was a pretty bright guy. He had me go up and get a book for him out of the library. Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which is a great book if anybody does it. It's a great book. And it's a go back in time book. I love those books. Anyway, he pulls me aside. He goes, let me tell you something. He goes, you have a 1.5-year-old daughter. I go, yeah. He goes, I did too when I got busted in Louisiana. You see how many times I saw her in 15 years? I go, no. He goes, once. He goes, I understand you're not saying it. I guess, he goes, but you see your co-defendant in the other pod, they have the glass walls where you can see, I go, yeah. He goes, he's already cooperated. Your other co-defendant, he's going to cooperate. He goes, I know, you have a family at home. He goes, this is my advice. He goes, look around this jail. He goes, it's not who isn't a snitch who hasn't cooperated. It's who hasn't done it yet.
Yeah.
He goes, it's not the mores and values that you're clinging to died a lifetime ago. Remember, just a year earlier, 91, Sammy the Bullet ratted out the entire mob.
Yep.
And remember, because of the RICO laws, I mean, what I tell people is when you're running and gunning and doing your own smuggling or this crime or that crime, you don't know. But when you get in their world, now they got you.
Yeah.
Like they got you.
Especially with the Ricos. That's how they took down a lot of those guys. Obviously, with Sammy cooperating, he took down a lot of them anyway. But you don't necessarily need to catch a guy with the product with his hands
it's
dirty,
conspiracy
so
and RICO.
Yeah. Racketeering, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization.
So anyway, I took that advice and I went home, and I still didn't know what to do. I called from the jail and told my right-hand guy, I go, listen, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm looking at RICO. And I had no plans. I go, but just do me a favor. Tell anybody that knows me, don't say a word. Don't talk to me. Don't take my phone calls. Just stay away from me because I'm hot. So I took a poison pill,
Right.
to make sure no matter what I did, nobody I knew was going to hurt. And I went home, and I didn't know what to do. I was literally painting one friend of mine's house. I had sold my truck before I left. Now I just lost a couple $100,000 between legals fees and bonds and and the weed. So I'm rat ass broke, man. I got a baby, a 1.5-year-old baby, a wife I just married, and what people don't understand about drug dealing is you're up high spending money, then all of a sudden you've
boom.
Yeah, it's like that. And of all the smugglers I know, there's only a handful that actually left the business, didn't do any real big time or didn't get busted at all and still have money. Yeah. That's a rarity. So fast money, what I always say, fast money, it ain't easy. Yep. And it's never meant to last, as Jimmy Buffett says. Yep. So I get home, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm working part-time in an auto shop doing oil changes and spark plugs and stuff like that, and a friend of mine calls me up who's a yacht broker, and he goes, hey, I heard you got busted. And I mean, nobody's calling me. But he wasn't a drug dealer. He was a yacht broker. He'd gotten busted in a reverse sting pretending to thought he was selling a plane or a boat to a drug smuggler. And all you have to say is, I'm a drug smuggler, I'm going to pay you in cash. And it's as if you did the run yourself.
Right.
It's conspiracy.
Yep.
So Dave is a multi-millionaire. He's got 5 offices and houses and Lear jets. He's going down. And he calls me up and he says, hey, how'd you like to work for the DEA? And I'm like my baby's in the high chair. My wife's in the kitchen. I'm like, what are you, crazy? He goes, just come talk to me. So what had happened was, I said, why are you doing this? And he kind of said, the DEA is kind of like network. Was it like Amway?
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, I'll get credit for what you do, bringing in people below me to bring up. And that started a 2-year odyssey where I ended up going to Jacksonville, driving. I had a canary yellow station wagon, like Dodge, like, I don't know, whatever, 70, I don't know what it was. No air conditioning. That's all I had. And you'd be surprised. When you're dancing with the crowd, but when you go down, you'd be surprised how many people. I always say, you dance with the party. When you leave alone, and usually somebody's shoe hits you in the back of the head on the way out. Yeah, there were so many people that were gleeful to see me. Mr. I don't say I'm Mr. Big, but Mr. Mediocre or whatever. Because in my world, the big guys were bringing in
right
200,000 pounds at a time.
Still, there was people that praised your downfall.
Oh yeah. And but I went to work for the DEA, and the one thing. So when you talk about, you work for the cops, let's talk about. It's about the deal, right? If they would have said, here's your deal, you need to turn in every one of your friends you went to high school with, and you need to turn in all your this, and I wouldn't have done that deal, But the deal I got was, the state of Ohio knew I wasn't going to bust anybody in Ohio because the only people I knew in Ohio all turned me in. I had 17 people, testify against me.
There was nobody there for you to give up.
Right. And so the DEA went to Ohio. This guy, my DEA handler, is really slick, and convinced them that whatever assets and cases I put together, they'll get a part of. And none of this is about busting drugs. This is all about asset seizures. If you look at this whole business of the drug wars, the cops get paid as they climb the ladder. So if you're a federal employee, you start as let's say you start as a customs agent on the boat. You're a GS7 maybe. If you end up becoming the guy that's running the customs division in your in South Florida or Northern District or Southern District or Central District, those are how the DEA and customs divide up the state. You might be making 150,000, 180,000, and so it's all about notches on the. I've had cops tell me we don't care about weed, but what they want is the gold, the boat, the Porsche, the money, and that money built bigger police departments, bigger jails, And remember, judges taking kickbacks need to have lawyer. Nobody loved this more than the cops, the lawyers, and the politicians, right? The cops got bigger boats, faster boats, more toys. The lawyers got, listen, when you're a drug dealer and you go in front of a criminal lawyer, they love you.
Oh, yeah. You're going to pay out.
Yeah, you're looking at a lot of time and you have money.
Yep.
My first lawyer in Ohio, when I got busted, I had an $80,000 bond. Guy referred me over there. I go in there, he goes, just sign over your bond. And I got a phone call. It was Sandy, when I called my mentor, one of my mentors. I don't know how he found me. He goes, what are you doing, son? I go, I got busted. He goes, I heard you got busted. I go, yeah. And he was, part of the gangs. And he goes, I got a guy wants me to sign over my bond receipt for 80 grand. He goes, do yourself a favor. Don't walk. Run. I was this close to signing the papers. That guy would have sold me down he was just taking the 80 grand, let me go to jail. But they always fight for the guys to put the most money.
Right.
But
so what was your role in this outfit? I mean, did you have to facilitate, buys, runs, or what was your role?
So what we did with the DEA was combination. Like sometimes they just call me up and go, okay, he basically had like a team. He had this other guy, I call it Sabo in the book, which was a huge smuggler that was now working with these guys undercover. David, the yacht broker, and me, and we were kind of like, David maybe would set up a mark, and then me and Sabo would come in as the dealers or the smugglers, One time, it was just, one time we got, they're so complex, the stories, but
I was about to say that's probably like a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, but I'll tell you the last one I did, and the last one I did was I was put in as a player. Mm-hmm. I was just an actor on the stage, and it was the Canadian Mafia, the Irish Mafia, the Hells Angels bike gang, and another biker gang out of Canada called the Rock Creek something motorcycle gang. And there was this guy, William McAllister, and this guy, he had been in and out of prison his whole life. He had robbed a Brinks truck in Boston and killed one of the guards, shot him point blank in the face. They had gotten pulled over one time. He had a briefcase with a machine gun and a hand grenade in it, and the trigger on the thing would shoot them. There's probably a MAC-10 in there.
Yeah.
Right. And he was part of this Irish mob, and they wanted to buy 10,000 kilos of coke. And that's the kind of volume they were doing. And they had brought in my DEA handler because he had already busted some. See, Canada at the time didn't have conspiracy laws.
Right.
So there was no way to bust a big guy. You're not going to bust a guy with a gram and a guy with an ounce and a guy with a kilo and get your way all the way up to the top, right? That's the way that when we got, what brought down me and Terry's 12-year ongoing criminal operation? They don't even know. All the weed we moved, one guy got busted with 1 pound. And that turned in and it got all the way to Terry and got to me. One guy with 1 pound. So what we ended up doing was we took down the largest group in Canada. It took a while to do. Again, I talk about it in the book, but listen how slick this is. So now this was huge. So we go up to Canada, and of course the DEA is flying me up and flying Sabo up. We got to rent a car. We go to this meeting where there's like Don't forget, there's the Canadian Mounted Police. There's we're in Vermont, so we have the local Vermont police. We have the local Vermont DEA. The DEA had flown up. The brass had flown up from Florida in a Learjet. We're in a military base on the Canadian border. It was so effing cold that when the Learjet landed, I go, I'm not walking out there. It's like 26 below on the runway. They're like, John's like, get out there, and we go in there, and in this case, they had one of the guys had flown to Florida prior. I can't remember his name right now. It's in the book. And we set up a dog and pony show. We had my wife, who was the blonde with the hot body, and sitting by the pool. There was me. I was the DEA handler's right-hand man. David had a house on the water because he was really rich before he was, worth, it's probably a $10 million house today. So it all looked good, right? And then that was the precursor to the Dog and Pony Show to convince the one, McAllister's partner, who was Paul LaRue, that we could do all this. We fly two C-111 cargo planes up there. The government does. In the plane are 3 Honda Accords. Actually, one like my wife was driving at the time. And here's what they had. They had a setup where you could turn the key on, and I don't know the sequence, but if I remember correctly, turn on the radio, push in the cigarette lighter, and a secret compartment would pop out in the back, right? And each car had 100 keys in it. So They had 3 cars with 300 keys total. Fly it all the way up there to Burlington, Vermont. They meet at a Denny's, and LaRue doesn't have the money. He goes, but if you front it to me, I'll bring you back the coke, and I'll bring you the money back in like 24 hours. And the DEA is not going to front the Canadian drugs, And they had customs in their pocket, so that they said, if you give it to us, we go, how are you going to get it in? We put it in semis and in customs. We're bribing the customs agents. So that's what we knew that. So what they did was, and I didn't go into the Jamaican thing. When I was in Jamaica, I almost got killed down there doing it, trying to do a DEA operation. But, well, the guy threatened me, and I know how that ends, but I got out of there. And that's a whole other story. It's in the book. But and basically we can't put the deal together because the guy doesn't have the money. And there's like, I remember one time they brought me down to this room, and there's like all these cops standing around, they're whiteboarding everything, and they bring me in, and they want to see what I'm wearing, because if they're going to shoot somebody, they want to know who's the under. They know themselves who are the undercover informants. So I'm down there, and I got a little leather jacket on, a baseball cap, and I hear one guy yell out, "That's him? He's so short." So I yelled out, "Shoot high," So anyway, they didn't have, that deal fell apart. So now we're all up in, me and David are the other guy, Sabo, are in Canada, because what they have to do is, this is key. When an American DEA agent or American operative goes into a foreign country, like when I went into Jamaica, or when they go into Canada, you have to announce them.
Yeah.
Right, okay. What you do is you take private citizens like me, send me down there covertly. Like when I was in Jamaica, I was covert. Mm-hmm. They didn't announce me.
Right.
I was just a guy in Jamaica. And when I was in Canada, I was sitting around, I guess I was in the gift shop on the border, because they just wanted me on that side of the border. None of the Americans could go on that side of the border, because if it got out, LaRue and McAllister, with their inside connections, might have known that, these guys are cops.
Right.
So they did not do the deal. But they called me on my cell phone. They go, "Hey, we're closing it down. Come back across the border." I go, "Okay," because I was in, the Canadian side now. They go, "But only go to one customs agent and walk up to him and just tell him your name." He goes, "Go look out there when you see the guy in the gray hair." The guy goes, "Yeah, only go to him," because they knew that guy was straight. And so I walk up, I go, "Hey, so-and-so." He goes, "All right, go ahead through." No papers, nothing. And while I was there, I bought a box of Monte Cristo cigars. The DEA inadvertently let me, because they're illegal, smuggle in a box of cigars. And a couple months later, they did put the deal together, and they flew a guy down to Jacksonville. He had $500,000 on him. I go into the story in the book, and they ended up going back up to Canada and busting LaRue and McAllister and taking down the whole Canadian. Nice. And that one, they cared about the drugs. The guy was a murderer. He was moving, large amounts of cocaine. But for the most part,
So altogether, you didn't really have to do no time off of it.
I did. That was the weird thing. When I went up to get sentenced, they gave me probation.
Nice.
And I don't know why. And I stayed friends with the arresting officer in Ohio for these 34 years and my DEA agent. And I asked the arresting officer every year, when I say friends, I'd call him every year or two around the holidays because, buddy, I'm still straight and narrow. I'm doing good. Let you know that, And I actually told Terry, I go, hey, I talked to Dennis Kavanaugh the other day. He goes, oh, man, tell him I said hi. What a good guy. He goes, tell him thank you. He really straightened my life out. Yeah. Because if you're in a life of, there's no way you don't deep in your heart know this isn't going to last forever.
Right.
You don't admit it. You don't say it every day, but when you're living and breathing it. Remember, we started when we were 13 and 15 and 16.
Yeah.
So it's all Now I'm 30-something, and I've been doing it basically my whole adult life. Not even more than my from childhood. Right. So I don't advocate it. I don't tell, obviously, there's better, you'll make more money legally.
Right. Especially nowadays, too.
Yeah.
Well, here's the part of the story, Ken, where I allow people to plug, whatever they want to plug. Obviously, you've mentioned, a couple of times your book. I know we had talked before we started. There's a website or something that you wanted to mention. Anything that you want to plug and get the word out there for, buddy, you go right ahead. Now's your chance.
I'm glad you said that. So the one thing that's really important to me is the charity freedomgrow.org. Freedomgrow.org is a charity that I donate to. I donate my time. I donate money. Y'all can do the same thing. What it is it's a charity that supports nonviolent marijuana prisoners. There are people in jail right now doing 30 years, life, not just a few people. There are people going to jail still. Last year, 250,000 people were charged with cannabis crimes. 92% for simple possession. 92%, 230,000 people roughly. Their jobs can lose their jobs, privileges for simple possession of marijuana. This marijuana is still a tool being used, and please donate to, or give some time to freedomgrow.org. They help prisoners, their families. They help them when they get out, find jobs. They help them with a couple bucks when they get. You walk out of jail. I walked out of jail in Ohio. I had money in my commissary. After I go, nothing. I don't have any money. Like when you're in jail, you know how much money you got in your commissary. Nothing. They go 19 cents. I go, no. Anyway, so we try to really help those prisoners, get them reacclimated, get their kids school supplies. You can't buy if your kid's having a birthday and you're in jail, you can't even get a card to send them. Usually you have to have a prisoner, another guy who's artistic, draw up a card, and you have to, give them, a side dish or some candy or something, whatever you can. The other thing I'd like to talk about is we have a new website, besides my website, onestepovertheline.com, and my podcast, One Step Over the Line. The podcast, we have a new website coming online called crimenightly.com. And Crime Nightly is going to be a place where hopefully we can get all things true crime. Your podcast, my podcast, Matt Cox, all the guys, Ian Bick, and all our podcast buddies, but also stories of the time, unsolved crimes, and things to buy to protect yourself, like from pickpockets to, advice. And there'll be lawyers on there giving advice. So keep an eye on a website called crimenightly.com. It's up and running, but it's really not gotten to it's really going to explode. I think everybody's going to like it. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this episode, Go pick up the book, One Step Over the Line. I'm sure it's available all the normal markets, right?
Well,
Amazon,
you know
Barnes
what?
and Noble.
I'll tell you what. If you go to my website, onestepovertheline.com, there's a little button on the top that says book. You go in there and put in promo code. What should we make the promo code today's show?
CNE.
CNE. And you will get a free audio and digital copy. So you can get a PDF copy or you can get the MP3 audio written by me. And I did the reading, which is really hard for a guy that's profoundly dyslexic and I failed first grade, barely graduated high school, which is another reason that people get into crime when they fall off the learning wagon. You know, that's a whole nother show though.
Well, there you go, folks. We'll put We'll put the website in the show notes below. Go in, promo code CNE. Get yourself a free copy of One Step Over the Line. Ken, I appreciate you coming on the show, my friend. It's been a blast.
Oh man, it's been a real pleasure. We do that. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this episode of Crime and Entertainment. We'll see you next week.